Chapter 78. Li Luan's reaction wasn't slow, but the person's reaction was faster. Before Li Luan could pull out his sword, a black muzzle was already pointed at him. Not only that, there were several black muzzles that were pointed at his subordinates. Don't move, those who surrender will be spared. Those who resist will be killed. A loud voice sounded. It was the voice of the company commander, Xiao Feng. As soon as he finished speaking, bah! A gunshot rang out. One of the Shang dynasty's soldiers clutched his chest and fell to the ground with a look of unwillingness and shock. In his hand he had already pulled out a long sword and was about to slash forward. One of the Lung Feng soldiers felt the danger and killing intent. Without hesitation he opened fire and ended the life of the enemy who wanted to resist. The sound of the gunshot was loud and clear in the room, but in the night wind the sound could not travel far. With one person dead, the room became much quieter. Then the captain Li Luan felt that his life was being threatened. He didn't want any of his brothers to die here, so he shouted anxiously, "Listen to me, don't move. Take out your weapons and throw them on the ground. I think that since these people said that they would be spared if they surrendered, they should be true to their words. That's right, we will keep our promise. The prerequisite is that you guys have to listen to us too. If you guys have any ulterior motives, you will end up like that person." Xiao Feng looked at Li Luan's performance and nodded his head in satisfaction. However, in order to not cause any more problems, he couldn't help but threaten him. When the black muzzle was aimed at him again, Li Luan felt his body tense up. He clearly saw the scene just now. This black metal thing could easily take a person's life. Not wanting to die, he hurriedly threw his sword and scabbard on the ground. At the same time he covered his head with both hands and squatted down. With Li Luan taking the lead, the other 18 brothers followed suit and threw down their weapons, crouching on the ground with their hands on their heads. "Very good," Xiao Feng praised, then gestured to Lung Feng who was at the side. A few of them took out ropes from their backpacks and tied up all 19 of them, including Li Luan. Just as he was done, the door opened again. A soldier in camouflage uniform walked in. He stood straight and saluted. "Sir, the city gate has been opened by our brothers hiding in the city. 2nd platoon, 3rd company, and 1,000 auxiliary soldiers have entered the city. Company Commander Tingshan, may I ask if we can besiege the barracks in the city?" "Yes, everything is going according to plan. Also, tell the brothers that the auxiliary troops are not to participate in the battle. Go and maintain order in the city. As long as the civilians do not cause trouble and stay in their homes, they are not to be harmed. Most of the people in the city are Han." Xiao Feng replied with a military salute. "Yes." The soldier who responded with a military salute turned around to pass down the order. Xiao Feng also prepared to bring people to carry out the battle plan. At this moment, Li Luan, who was squatting on the ground, spoke. "Sir, are you the pirates on the other side? What? Do you have any questions?" Xiao Feng turned around and asked, a sharp look flashing in his eyes. Naturally, he did not like the word pirate. It was only because the 6th young master said that it was not good to expose their strength. Thus they had no choice but to call themselves pirates. Feeling that Xiao Feng's gaze could kill, Li Luan instinctively lowered his head and avoided it. Then he said in a small voice, "If you can really not harm the civilians in the city, I am willing to be your guide. There are many of my brothers in the barracks. I think I can help persuade them." Li Luan volunteered himself for 2 reasons. Firstly, he had long lost confidence in the #1 Shang dynasty. Even the soldiers did not have enough to eat, let alone the common people. Secondly, the weakness of the Shang dynasty made them feel extremely aggrieved. After being surrounded and forbidden from entering the sea and not being able to send out any ships, they had actually holed themselves up like turtles and refused to move. It was as if they couldn't think of any solution. Instead, they had placed all their hopes on the outside, praying that others would discover their tragic situation and that someone would come to their rescue. This was completely a lucky move. It was no different from spending 2 yuan and waiting for 5 million. The possibility of them being rescued was close to 0. Thirdly, he had just witnessed Lung Feng's prowess. With one shot, one of his subordinates was killed. This should be the gun that Deming was talking about. However, from the looks of it, it seemed to be even more powerful than the gun in the legends. Faced with such a powerful weapon, what could the Shang dynasty use to fight them? Fourthly, although he did not have much contact with them, he had heard some things about these pirates since he was guarding Qishan, which was the closest place to Xichen City. They were completely different from other pirates. They did not bully civilians. When they robbed, they only robbed boats and people. However, they did not kill civilians or merchants. With all these knowledge and after seeing Ling Feng's mental state, Li Luan had the idea of helping them. Not only could he redeem himself, he might even be able to save more of his brothers in the barracks. Li Luan's volunteering naturally made Xiao Feng overjoyed. Alright, if you do this well, not only can you save more people from the flames of war, you can also save more lives. You can also be considered to have performed a meritorious deed. How about this? Untie him and bring him along with us. Li Luan regained his freedom. However, there were 2 Lung Feng beside him so that they could restrain him immediately if he made any strange movements. With Li Luan leading the way, the cold vanguard moved even faster. With the cover provided by the strong wind at night, when the first company and the third company, a total of 200 cold vanguards, arrived at the entrance of Xi'an military camp, the soldiers there were still not alerted at all. Rocket launcher team, get ready. Everyone load your guns. If there's any resistance, kill. As soon as they arrived in front of the barracks, Xiao Feng and third company's Chong Tingshan looked at each other and gave out the order for the battle. In an instant, the 200 people completed their actions silently. Even in the dark, all the Lung Feng's actions of checking their guns were still swift and perfect. All of this made Li Luan's jaw drop. He had been in the army since he was a teenager. He had seen many armies, including some elite ones, but this was the first time he had seen one as outstanding as the one before him. Were these people the celestial soldiers and celestial generals that were mentioned in the books? Why were their actions so uniform? Why didn't the 200 people make any extra noise? At this moment, Li Luan had a feeling that Xi'an would definitely be taken down if they were to fight head-on. At the same time, he did not know why he felt his blood boiling. At this moment, he suddenly had the urge to join this army. Ready. The squad leaders reported softly. As the commander of this battle, Xiao Feng said to Li Luan beside him after seeing that the Lung Feng were ready, "It's up to you now. I can guarantee you that as long as you lay down your weapons and surrender, you can live. On the other hand, no matter what the reason is, if you dare to pick up your weapons and resist, you must die." Understood. Li Luan could tell that this army's combat power was extraordinary. He did not dare to bargain and immediately agreed. Then an iron loudspeaker appeared in front of him. It was a round loudspeaker. Even without electricity, the loudspeaker could spread the sound better. Holding the loudspeaker, Li Luan's loud voice suddenly rang in the night. "Brothers in the camp, I'm Li Luan, the squad leader of the guards on the wall. You've been surrounded. Lay down your weapons and surrender and you can live. We're all Hans. 500 years ago we were one family. Don't be a feudal resistance." His shout was like a clap of thunder in the silent night. It exploded in the entire camp and caused an uproar. For a moment there were all kinds of curses in the camp. Most of them were cursing to find their uniforms and weapons. The cursing continued for about half a quarter of an hour before it slowly subsided. Then in the dark, 100-man squad crept toward the wooden fence. It seemed like they wanted to use their advantage of being more familiar with the terrain to launch a counterattack. Ready the rocket launcher. Target the wooden fence. Fire. Xiao Feng had already seen the enemy's every move with his night vision goggles. Night battles were a part of Lung Feng's training. Because of proper nutrition, the ordinary soldiers did not suffer from night blindness. At this moment they could clearly see the enemy's actions in the opposite camp. The commander gave the order and immediately 2 rocket launchers with powerful flames shot forward. After 1.5 seconds they slammed into the wooden fence that could block the impact of manpower and horsepower. Immediately flames soared into the sky and the sound was like thunder. The rocket launcher was a type of infantry anti-tank and siege weapon. It was light and had a short range. At the same time it could be fired in a straight line, upward or downward direction. It had a variety of attack methods that were perfect for close-range sieges. The 2 rocket launchers were fired and instantly destroyed the main gate of the camp. The powerful flames and explosive force scared the 100-man vanguard soldiers who wanted to sneak out of the camp. What is this? Is this the wrath of the heavens? This must be the punishment of the heavens. After seeing such powerful firepower, the 100-man vanguard's morale immediately collapsed. In the face of the unknown, humans naturally had a kind of fear, not to mention that it had such great power. Li Luan looked at everything in front of him in a daze. When he saw such powerful firearms, he knew that the soldiers of Qishan's camp had been defeated. He only hesitated for a few seconds before he shouted again, "Brothers, I'm Li Luan. You should have seen the power of these firearms. If you don't want to die, throw down your weapons and surrender. Your families are still waiting for us to return safely in the city." Chapter 79. Under Li Luan's persuasion and the powerful impact of the rocket launcher, some of the smarter soldiers finally realized that they weren't strong enough. The first person threw his weapon to the ground. Then, like a contagious disease, there was a second person, a third person. The frightened soldiers of Qishan threw down the weapons in their hands one by one and then walked out of the military camp in groups. They covered their heads and walked out of the military camp. The entire battle had ended so simply without firing a single shot or firing a single cannon. Of course, this was because of the deterrence of the powerful weapons. However, more importantly, it was because the soldiers of Qishan already had a grudge against the Shang dynasty. They didn't have enough to eat and couldn't wear clothes. Such an army had long lost their morale. How could they be counted on to win the battle? From Li Luan's words, the Qishan military camp had more than 2,000 soldiers. Xiao Feng ordered the auxiliary soldiers who had already entered the city to maintain law and order to take in the captives. At the same time, Qishan city was sealed. Only people were allowed to enter and not leave. The entire city was checked overnight. If there were any dangerous people, they would be killed. However, at the same time, the soldiers were not allowed to harass the commoners. If they were caught, they would be dealt with according to military law. After occupying the city, there had been countless military exercises to maintain peace. Putting them in Qishan city was just turning the exercises into actual battles. However, the soldiers of Lungfeng who had made all kinds of preparations were still very familiar with it. In just a few hours, Qishan city's law and order were restored. There were even some courageous commoners who dared to appear in the morning market to continue trading. When the sun rose, a new 5-starred red flag was placed on the city walls of Qishan city. This meant that from this moment onwards, this place was under Yang Qindong's control. Get someone to inform Captain Gao Xiong of this news. Then pass it on to the 6th young master. At the same time, all platoon leaders and squad leaders will have a meeting to review the battle and point out their own shortcomings. Xiao Feng followed Yang Qindong's training and carried out his work with the mindset that there must be a conclusion after the battle. In conclusion, it was a method that could allow people to grow and become stronger quickly. Reality also proved that a big summary after a big battle and a small summary after a small battle could expose more potential problems and point out the correct direction to fight the next battle. In the palace hall, the officials had already arrived at the morning court. Because the emperor had not arrived yet, the officials gathered in 2s and 3s to chat. "Lord Li, did you receive Yang Shima's gift yesterday?" A voice that was not too abrupt came from the crowd. In fact, he was already used to such conversations before every morning court session. "Lord Zhang, what kind of gift is that? Isn't it just toilet paper?" Lord Li shook his head lightly as if Lord Zhang was making a fuss over nothing. "Hey, there are many ways to use that. If I'm not wrong, you definitely haven't used that thing," Lord Zhang said with a mysterious expression. "Am I useless? Did you use it?" Lord Li's curiosity was piqued by Lord Zhang's words. "Of course, it's all thanks to my wife. When it was delivered, her stomach was not feeling well, so she took it and used it. When she came back, she told you about the wonderful effects of this thing. It was really comfortable and very soft. I didn't believe it, so I used it once. I decided that after that I'll always use this toilet paper. Not only that, when I'm done with court, I'll send someone to the Yang clan manor to find a Yang Xian horse and get some more," Lord Zhang said as if he had benefited from this experience. It wasn't just Lord Zhang in court. Lord Wang, Lord Sun, Lord Zhou, Lord Wu, and the other officials had all used this benefit and knew of its benefits. The officials who didn't think much of it before were all intrigued by the words of these people. They all decided to go back to their mansions to see what the toilet paper was. They wanted to see if it was better than the wood and bamboo pieces that they usually used. Because of Yang Qindong, the toilet bowl had been introduced first, and the majority of officials in the capital had already started using it. Now toilet paper had become a complementary product. Although it seemed unremarkable, it was truly the beginning of a new civilization. Not to mention what was said in the morning court, After the court was dismissed, most of the important officials hurried back to their residences. Not long after, the stewards of the various residences boarded their carriages and left the city, heading straight for the Yang clan manor 15 li south of the city. This was because the Yang clan manor had a large number of potatoes, and it was the only one in the Great Ming dynasty. For its safety, the Eastern faction guards and embroidered uniform guards took turns to guard the manor to prevent anyone from causing trouble. When the stewards of the various residences arrived, they were all blocked outside. Left with no choice, they could only pass the visiting cards from their family to Steward Yang Neng and explain their intentions. Regarding this, the new steward Yang Neng had already received instructions from the sixth young master. He cupped his fists and said to the stewards who came forward to ask for toilet paper, "I'm sorry everyone. My sixth young master said that the toilet paper was shipped from the sea, and the production is limited. Previously I took out the toilet paper because I thought that it would be better to share it with everyone, but now I really don't have much left. If everyone really wants it, then wait until the Heavens Beyond trading firm opens for business and buy it there." Yang Ning had a smile on his face. As the saying goes, a slap doesn't hit a smiling face. Since he had already said so, what else could the stewards do? They could only hurriedly return to their residences. Since they didn't have any new goods for a while, they would have to use the toilet paper that was delivered yesterday sparingly. Other than the first young master and first madam, everyone else could forget about using it. Of course, there were also some officials who thought that Yang Chendong was too stingy. It was just some unremarkable toilet paper and he wanted to set up a trading firm that they had never heard of to sell it. How much money could that thing be worth? Could he earn back the capital by opening a shop for it? These people's thoughts weren't wrong. After all, toilet paper wasn't something that could be put on the table. Moreover, it wasn't like they couldn't do without it. In the past, when there was no such thing, shouldn't everyone still do what they should do? For something like this, if it was sold at a high price, there probably wouldn't be many people who would buy it. However, if it was sold at a low price, they probably wouldn't even be able to earn back the rent for the shop. That was the normal way of thinking, but how could the people of this era guess what was going on in Yang Chendong's mind? If he said that toilet paper wasn't worth much, there was nothing wrong with that. However, Yang Chendong firmly believed that once people were used to it, they wouldn't be able to adapt to it if you asked them to use wood or bamboo. More importantly, he intended to use hunger marketing to sell it, which meant that he would sell it at a fixed amount a day. Based on the idea that the rarer something was, the more valuable it would be. Once the supply exceeded the demand, the price would naturally rise. When that time came, if other adults used toilet paper, would you still have the nerve to use bamboo? Even if the price was slightly higher, there would still be many people who would rush to buy it. The capital was not like any other place. There were many rich people here and even more people with authority. Even if the price of toilet paper was a little more expensive, it was still completely acceptable. This would become one of Yang Chendong's tools for making money. Although he couldn't make a huge profit, he would win in the long run. Who residence? Little Qing was lying on a wooden bed with a painful expression. The 2 hits on her buttocks made her feel as if she was about to die. Little Qing, how do you feel? Does it hurt? With a face full of tears, Hu Yan at this moment made people truly understand what it meant to say that women were made of water. Ever since they returned to the courtyard last night and little Qing was beaten twice, she had been crying non-stop. Even after a night had passed, her tears still flowed out uncontrollably. She really didn't know where her tears came from. "Miss, don't cry. Your eyes are swollen. It's so ugly." Resisting the pain on her butt, little Qing, who felt sorry for Hu Yan, squeezed out a smile and said, "The miss was the master and the maid was the servant." In this hierarchical feudal society, little Qing still dared to make fun of her miss like this. It could be seen that the relationship between the two was really good to a certain extent. "I don't care. I don't care if it's ugly. I just want to cry. I want to cry for my father to see how hard he hit me." Hu Yan shook her head vigorously, looking very wronged. "But miss, the Lord has already hit me. It's useless even if you cry. It's better to find some medicine for little Qing to apply to the wound." Little Qing shook her head helplessly. Her miss was really cute at this time, but her butt was really painful. Do I need to apply medicine? Little Qing, is it very painful? Don't worry, I'll go out and find medicine. Hu Yan also got up at this moment, then wiped the tears on the corner of her eyes with her sleeve, and then strode out of the room. Outside the Mrs. Courtyard, Hu Zhongning gave Hu Yan a confinement order, and Lieutenant Gao Xing was guarding here. When she came out, she just saw Gao Xing dressed in a brocade guard uniform, and Hu Yan was angry. She thought that it was this person who complained and caused her little Qing and Lieutenant Sun Chuang to suffer. Mississippi. As soon as he saw Hu Yan come out, Gao Xing straightened his chest and greeted her. Although he knew that what he did was arranged by the Lord, it was a fact that he had offended the miss. As soon as Hu Yan walked to the front of the courtyard, she deliberately pretended to be very angry and looked at Gao Xing. But perhaps this gaze was too weak. Gao Xing's expression did not change, and he still looked neither servile nor overbearing. Do you have injury medicine? Hu Yan, who wanted to be angry and ignore Gao Xing, soon couldn't bear it. Thinking of little Qing who was in pain in the room, she had to lower her head. Yes. Hearing that she was not going to question him, but wanted injury medicine, Gao Xing immediately took out a porcelain bottle from his arms and handed it over. Use the amount of medicine to cover the wound 3 times a day. Chapter 80. Reaching out to take the porcelain bottle, Hu Yan angrily turned around and left without even saying a word of thanks. Gao Xing seemed to be used to being treated like this. He just smiled and stood there again. At this time, a cough suddenly sounded behind him. He turned around vigilantly. After seeing the person, he hurriedly bowed respectfully and said, "Sir." Why did Miss look for you just now? The person who came was Hu Zhongning. At this time he had a constipated expression. After the morning court he was called by his mother, Hu Yushi, to find a way to get some toilet paper. At this moment Hu Zhongning was stumped. It turned out that after the Yang family sent the toilet paper yesterday, Hu Wangshi, who was in charge of the backyard, was going to put it in the family's warehouse. However, Hu Yan, who was rushing over, took it away. Then she used it and the effect was really good. She gave the rest of the things to her mother and grandmother, Hu Yushi. With the recommendation of her granddaughter, Hu Yushi had people verify the magical effect of this thing. Then she sent the rest of the toilet paper to her relatives in the city. This was also the old lady's style of doing things. Perhaps because of her humble background, Hu Yushi had always valued her relatives very much. Once there was something good, she would immediately send it over. The toilet paper was the same. Except for a small packet, the rest were sent away. Hu Yan came back from the morning court and asked the old lady about the toilet paper. The old lady, who had no stock, had to give the task to her son. She also said that she wanted to get some more. There were still some relatives who had not shared it. In Hu Yushi's eyes, her son was the guardian of the genie guards. There was nothing that could be difficult for him. After Hu Zhongning received the task, he was not in a hurry. He sent the housekeeper of the house to the Yang family village 15 miles south of the city to ask for it. Unexpectedly, he returned empty-handed. According to the housekeeper, not only the Hu family but many ministers in the court also sent their housekeepers, but they did not bring back a packet of toilet paper. Hu Zhongning, who had already promised his mother, was a little anxious. Thinking that the toilet paper was given to the old lady by his daughter, she should have some stock in her hands. He had to bite the bullet and come to the door. If it was in the past, Hu Zhongning guaranteed that his daughter would agree to such a thing. The relationship between father and daughter had always been very good. But this time he had no confidence in his heart. He had just punished the other party yesterday, so he wasn't very confident in speaking up now. Even though he wasn't sure, Hu Zhongning, who had always been extremely filial, still decided to give it a try. He couldn't let his mother down. While Hu Zhongning was still thinking about what to say, Gao Xing, who was standing in front of him, had already answered, "Sir, Miss asked me for injury medicine." Injury medicine? Was little Qing seriously injured? It's just 2 military rods. Hu Zhongning said nonchalantly. When Gao Xing heard this, he couldn't help but think in his heart. 2 strikes from the military rod might not be much to a soldier. But for Xiao Qing, who had tender skin and was greatly cared for by the young miss, that was already a very heavy punishment. He thought this in his heart, but he could not say it out loud. He could only say with a serious expression, "This is the first time that Maid Xiaoqing has been beaten by the military." In addition, these 2 beatings were not exaggerated at all. It is inevitable that she will be injured. What? Was there no water at all? I say, you are also right. She is a maid, not a thick-skinned soldier like you. How can she be treated equally? Hu Zhongning pretended to be very angry and reprimanded Gao Xing. Then he said casually, "Okay, I will go in and take a look." He strode into the young Miss courtyard. Looking at Hu Zhongning's departing figure, Gao Xing was stunned in place. How could he not be treated equally? If these 2 beatings were exaggerated and didn't hurt or itch, he was afraid that when he returned he would be accused of favoritism. This job was really not easy to do. Hu Zhongning strode into Hu Yan's courtyard. Before he even entered he called out loudly, "Is Yan here? Father is coming in." As soon as he shouted, Hu Yan, whose face was still filled with anger, had already walked out of the main door. "Of course your daughter is here. Where can a grounded person go?" Haha. Hu Zhongning smiled awkwardly when he heard the obvious hidden meaning in her words. Then he stretched his neck and glanced into the room. "Is your maid Xiaoqing all right?" "All right. She won't die for the time being." Hu Yan's answer was still cold. This time she was really disappointed in her father. It was true that she had done something wrong and she deserved to be grounded. However, he shouldn't have hit little Qing so hard. There was a lot of blood on her butt. She cried for the whole night and was still in a trance at this time. As soon as he heard the words "won't die," Hu Zhongning knew that his daughter was still angry with him. But as a father, how could he simply apologize? Thinking that if he continued, there might be more sarcastic remarks waiting for him, he simply did not ask anymore. Instead he asked straightforwardly, "Yan, father wants to ask you, do you still have the toilet paper that the Yang family sent yesterday?" If it were any other time, Hu Yan would definitely ask why, but now she was angry and turned around to leave without thinking. After a while, when she came back, she put a small packet of untouched toilet paper into Hu Zhongning's hand. "Don't tell me there's only this much?" Looking at the packet in his hand, Hu Zhongning felt that things were going to be bad. Daughter kept a total of 2 small packets and gave the rest to mother and grandmother. "What? Father, are you going to take that half packet too?" Hu Yan was really angry at this time. She thought that this was simply her father taking revenge on her. Because she made him angry, now he didn't even let her use the toilet paper and wanted to give it all away. Hu Zhongning heard the resentment in his daughter's voice and knew that if he didn't explain, it was likely to become a knot between the father and daughter. So he explained the matter again. "It's not that father wants it, but Yenner knows your grandmother. Whenever she has something good, she must give it to her relatives. See, when the toilet paper came, she gave it all away, but it was still not enough, so she called father and asked me to think of a way. But the housekeeper of the house went to Yangjia village. The housekeeper of the 6th young master said that the things were shipped from the sea and were not products of our great Ming dynasty. Now he doesn't have any stock in his hands. If he wants it, he can wait until the Heavens Beyond Trading Company opens and buy it there. But your grandmother is an impatient person, how can she wait for so long?" After saying this, Hu Zhongning spread his hands, indicating that he was helpless. Originally, Hu Yan was prepared to ignore her father, but when the matter involved Yang Chendong, she forgot the decision in her heart. The 6th young master doesn't have it? If not, why did he give it to every family yesterday? This doesn't make sense. Yes, if you say that the 6th young master doesn't have it at all, no one will believe it. But thinking about it, there shouldn't be much left, so it should be true. Otherwise, he wouldn't have embarrassed so many officials. But since he did this, the idea of getting the toilet paper from there is very small. Hu Zhongning said as he shook his head. After hearing her father's analysis, Hu Yan didn't have the same opinion. Instead, she said seriously, "Since the 6th young master has it, as long as the people sent out are suitable, they can definitely get some. Why don't I go?" She had always wanted to see what Yang Chendong looked like, but she didn't have the chance. Wasn't now the right time? She was going to get toilet paper for her grandmother, which was a show of filial piety. Even if others knew, they couldn't blame her. Originally, Hu Zhongning was still worried about this matter. His identity as a butler was not easy to use. Did he have to go personally? If he wanted to come, it would be fine, but if he didn't, wouldn't he lose face? Hu Zhongning really didn't have a better way to deal with Yang Chendong. He had just made a great contribution and the potatoes hadn't ripened yet. Who could force him to do things? Using martial arts to subdue people, how powerful was that young heir beside him? He was definitely not a match for him. If he couldn't do it, Hu Zhongning had no other way. But now that he heard that his daughter was going personally, his eyes lit up. Yes, his daughter was a child. It would be best if she came, but even if she didn't, it wouldn't be a big deal. But the only thing was that his daughter wasn't married yet. If word got out that she was so ostentatious, it would be bad for her reputation. Hu Zhongning didn't reject her immediately. Instead, he looked like he was deep in thought, which made Hu Yen see hope. Father, just let me go. I promise that after I go, as long as there is a little bit of toilet paper left in Yangjiao village, I will get it for you. Alright, I won't go alone. I'll ask Sister Yangqi to go with me as a companion. I think outsiders won't be able to say anything. Sister Yangqi, are you talking about Yang Duo heir who married Wang Go? Hu Zhongning immediately mentioned the situation of the Yang family's seventh sister. In the past, Hu Zhongning wouldn't have known about a daughter of the Yang family. But ever since Yang Chendong appeared, Yang Duo heir had become a celebrity and a woman that everyone knew. Yes, it's her, Hu Yen said proudly. Yang Duo heir hasn't been to the Yang village yet? This time it's only right for me to accompany her back. When the sixth young master sees his seventh sister and is happy, won't he give me whatever I want? Hu Yen said proudly, but in her heart she was thinking that since it was her first time meeting Yang Chendong, she should at least bring some greeting gifts. So she set her sights on Yang Duo heir. Hu Zhongning thought about the feasibility of this matter. Indeed, with such a reason, Yang Chendong would have a good impression of her and the chances of her getting toilet paper would increase a lot. But then his gaze fell on his daughter again, looking at her with a faint smile. Chapter 81. Hu Zhongning's gaze frightened Hu Yen. It was as if he had guessed what she was thinking. She blushed and didn't know what to say. Fortunately, Hu Zhongning spoke. All right, since that's the case, I'll send Gao Xing to go with you. With him, Wang Go won't dare to not let them go. With Hu Zhongning's support, Hu Yen believed that she could bring Yang Duo to the Yang village. She was overjoyed and said, Father is the best. Father has always been the best person. But remember, you must bring back toilet paper this time. Don't be so happy that you forget about the important matter. Hu Zhongning decided to remind his daughter. If she really went to see the sixth young master and forgot about other things, then the gains would not make up for the losses. Yes, Father, you can rest assured. Hu Yen patted her towering chest and promised. Then she had a grin on her face. Hu Yen went to prepare and said goodbye to little Qing. It was a pity that she couldn't bring her to see the sixth young master for the first time. This made little Qing even sadder on the bed. In her heart, she even thought that the young miss was different. Hu Zhongning called Gao Xing over and told him to cooperate with the young Mississippi. Then he thought to himself, a grown girl can't be kept at home. Yang village. In the courtyard, 50 boys and girls were undergoing intensive training. According to Yang Chendong's requirements, they were all between 14 and 18 years old and all of them had good figures. The girls were graceful and the boys were tall and straight. After praising Qiao Yin, he asked each yower to make a delicious meal for the 100 boys and girls, letting them fully experience the feeling of warmth. Then he took out the clothes that he had already prepared. When everyone changed into the new clothes, it was as if they had become different people. They were full of spirit and beauty. Not bad, you all have good external conditions, but this is not enough. But that's not enough. If you can't pass the next training, you'll still be eliminated. Do you understand? Yang Chendong stood in front of 100 people like a general who was called out on the battlefield. His voice was like a flood. Understood, the young boys and girls replied nervously. Here they had new clothes to wear and they could eat meat for every meal. Moreover, the dishes were very delicious. Every month they would receive 2 taels of silver. This new life filled them with hope. After experiencing this wonderful feeling, they would not be willing to leave even if they were asked to. How could they not perform well? Yang Chendong's voice echoed throughout the backyard. Stand up straight, look straight ahead and bend the corners of your mouth to a 45-degree angle. Keep smiling. Remember, the customer is God. You have to try your best to satisfy their needs. Their satisfaction is my satisfaction. Do you understand? Understood. The 100 people replied in unison. Young master. Tiger's mane suddenly appeared and half knelt in front of Yang Chendong. 7th young mistress is here. 7th sister? Yang Chendong's face showed a gentle expression. It was completely different from when he was lecturing the 100 people. 7th sister is not an outsider. Invite her here. She might be in a better mood if she sees the children. Yes. Young master, Miss Yang has been waiting outside the manor for 4 hours. What do you think? Tiger's mane did not leave immediately. Instead, he lowered his head and continued to report. Tell her that I have something to do today. I'll see her another day. Yang Chendong waved his hand. Since Miss Yang was late to find out, she had to pay the price. After understanding Yang Chendong's intention, Tiger's Mane stood up and left. Outside the manor, Yang Duo sat in the carriage with a gloomy face. She had a snow-white oval face and a pair of black eyes under her slender eyebrows. However, there was no light in her eyes. Instead, there was a hint of sadness. Once upon a time, Yang Duo was the apple of the Yang family's eye. Because she was the youngest daughter, she was doted on by her parents. When Yang Rong was studying in the study, he was willing to hold this youngest daughter in his arms. That was also the best time of Yang Duo's life. She never had anything to worry about. She could eat delicious food and wear the most beautiful clothes every day. However, everything changed with her father's death. After Yang Rong's death, Yang Duo only felt that the mountain she relied on collapsed. The world in her eyes also lost its former glory. It was as if the entire family changed at that moment. Her brothers and sisters were busy with their own things. Even her only mother had no time to care about other things because of her poor health. It was as if she was forced to grow up overnight. Yang Duo was no longer the little girl who was willing to joke. She became silent. Until she grew up and married Wang Go. Although this marriage did not seem to be blessed by the Yang family, in Yang Duo's eyes, Wang Go was a man who relied on his own struggles to grow up. He should be better than her brothers and sisters who relied on their birth. He should know how to work hard and know how to cherish everything that was hard to come by. When they first got married, the days were barely passable. The relationship between husband and wife was harmonious. But as the influence of the Yang family weakened, her status in the Wang family also declined day by day. In addition, the things she knew were too few, so in the end she was reduced to the point where the maids in the residence dared to give her a hard time and bully her. At this moment, Yang Duo missed her father's wide embrace. However, she knew that everything was gone and could not be returned. In the most bitter days, Yang Duo even thought of dying. However, when she thought of how she would explain to her parents in the afterlife if she died like this, she could only force herself to live on. She hoped that one day Wang Go would change his mind or someone in the Yang family could revive their glory. This was the sorrow of a woman in a feudal society. Everything had to rely on others. It was extremely difficult to rely on oneself to change anything. Fortunately, a life that should have been hopeless had a comprehensive change because of Yang Dong's unexpected arrival. That morning, the moment Yang Chendong kicked open the Wang family's door, Yang Duo's fate also changed. Her husband and mother-in-law being beaten made them start to face themselves again. At least in these few days she slowly felt that her dignity was respected again. Although this respect was only on the surface, Yang Duo was still full of hope in her heart. Today Hu Yan's sudden appearance, accompanied by the captain of the brocade guard, was to invite her back to the Yang family manor. In this regard, Wang Go did not dare to have the slightest objection. He even forced out a smile and said that if she wanted, she could stay at her maternal home for a few more days. Feeling that Wang Go was not concerned but afraid, Yang Duo's heart was filled with mixed feelings. What made her even more afraid was how to face her seventh brother. The person who would only follow behind her when they were young and whom she despised had finally grown up. Not only that, he seemed to be even more outstanding than her brothers. When she thought of the heroic aura that her sixth brother exuded when he kicked open the Wang family's door that morning, Yang Duo blushed with shame and did not dare to meet him. This was also why after a few days she still did not come to the Yang family manor to take a look. In the carriage, Yang Duo was very nervous, which made Hu Yan, who should have been nervous, relax a lot. He began to comfort Yang Duo. Sister Duo heir, the sixth young master is your brother and is so nervous about you. What are you afraid of? Listen to your younger sister. When you see him, you should reprimand him first to suppress his imposing manner. Hu Yan thought of Yang Chendong being scolded and not daring to talk back and couldn't help but giggle. Scold sixth brother? Why? Also, what should I scold him for? Yang Duo's face was filled with confusion. Clearly she did not understand what Hu Yan meant. You. Hu Yan put her finger to her mouth and rolled her eyes. Suddenly she said in surprise, scold him for beating your husband and mother-in-law. Let him give you an explanation. In short, you have to shock him first and let him know how powerful you are. Hu Yan's idea made Yang Duo shake her head and say, I'm not powerful. Otherwise, I wouldn't have suffered such a big loss in the Wang family. Forget it, I'd better not scold sixth brother. He beat the imperial court officials for me. He took a great risk. Hu Yan slowly closed her mouth. She knew that it was impossible to see Yang Chendong suffer. Seventh young lady, the young master invites you in. Outside, Hu Meng arrived in front of the carriage. He signaled Yang Lu with his eyes and Yang Lu replaced the original coachman. Gao Xing was also sent far away. Yang Lu then drove the carriage into the Yang clan manor. The East faction protector who was standing nearby saw that the carriage was driven by the Yang family's servant, so he did not come up to check. After a few days of contact, the two sides had a tacit understanding. The East faction protector and the genie guard would not take the initiative to trouble the Yang family. The Yang family's servants also followed the rules. All the carriages that came here were checked by those people except for the Yang family's carriages. In Yang Chendong's words, this was the Yang family manor. Did the Yang family need to check their own home? What was the reason? For this matter, the East faction protector also reported the matter to Wang Zhen, but the answer he got was that since the sixth young master said so, he would do as he said. The carriage smoothly drove into the Yang family manor. Through the curtain of the carriage, Hu Yan looked out curiously. However, it didn't seem to be any different from the other manors, which made her feel a little disappointed. It was not until the carriage drove into the square in the backyard of the Yang family manor that the scene in front of her changed. She saw 100 boys and girls wearing clothes that she had never seen before standing under the scorching sun, motionless. God! The clothes they wore are so beautiful. Hu Yan's gaze was deeply attracted by the scene in front of her as she spoke like a love-struck fool. Chapter 82. Yang Duo, on the other hand, was extremely nervous. She didn't know what to say when she saw Yang Chendong. She thought that her actions had already lost face for the Yang family. She wasn't mentally prepared yet. The carriage finally stopped not far from Yang Chendong. From here one could clearly see Yang Chendong, dressed in green, sitting under a parasol leisurely drinking tea. From time to time he would look at the scene. Whenever he found someone slacking while standing, he would shout from afar. Every time this happened, the person who was shouted would straighten their body, as if their entire appearance had changed in an instant. Stop! Yang Chendong's attention was drawn to the carriage when Yang Lu shouted for it to stop. Then he came over with a smile on his face. As he walked, he said, "Seventh sister, I missed you so much." As he spoke, Yang Chendong had already arrived in front of the carriage. Then he reached out his hand and lifted the curtain of the carriage. Then he smiled and reached out his hand to touch the person in the carriage. This was originally Yang Chendong's way of welcoming seventh sister. He hoped that a joke would make her relax. How could the meticulous sixth young master not know that seventh sister must have had a hard time in the Wang family all these years? She had probably developed a habit of being cautious. Welcoming her in such a joking way was to make her relax. But he never thought that his hand would reach out and grab the person. But why did this person look so unfamiliar? Her skin was whiter than snow, and her eyes were like a pool of clear water. When she looked around, she had an elegant and noble temperament. Her eyes were very big and her eyelashes were very long. At this moment she was blinking and looking at him. That cute and chubby little face was as red as an apple. In fact, Hu Yan really did not expect this to happen. At this time she was also frightened by the scene in front of her. When a pair of big hands were stuck under her armpits, her beautiful face had already turned pale at this moment. Shua! Yang Chendong's reaction was not slow. When he felt that he had grabbed the wrong person, he quickly retracted his hand and immediately bowed his head to apologize. "I'm sorry, Mississippi. I thought it was my seventh sister." Here. A timid voice sounded. Yang Duo popped her head out from behind Hu Yan, who was still in a panic. "Sixth brother, this is Miss Hu Yan, Lord Hu Zhongning's daughter." As if she felt the awkward atmosphere, Yang Duo hurriedly introduced Hu Yan's identity. Hearing seventh sister say that this girl was Hu Yan, Yang Chendong could not help sizing her up a few more times. She was indeed a great beauty. In terms of looks, she was similar to Zhao Liang, but her body was more voluptuous. "So it's Miss Hu. My apologies." Yang Chendong's reaction was fast. After knowing Hu Yan's identity, he immediately changed into a polite appearance, making people unable to get angry even if they wanted to. Yang Chendong took the initiative to apologize, which made Hu Yan a little embarrassed. She really didn't mean it. In addition, she had been educated since she was young. No matter what, she was still a daughter of a noble family. Of course, it was not good for her to blame the other party for such a thing. Hu Yan's face was red like the sunset. She softly said, "Hello, sixth young master." "Hello, hello." Yang Qindong quickly returned to normal. After answering with a smile, he reached out and helped Yang Duo, who had already squeezed forward, get off the carriage. As for Hu Yan, Yang Qindong did not want to offend her. He reached out and took the stool handed over by Yang Lu, allowing her to smoothly walk down by herself. Yang Duo did not pay attention to Hu Yan's change. She had been chirping like a lark in the car just now, but now she was as quiet as a thrush and didn't say a word. Most of her attention was on her sixth brother, Yang Qindong. With Yang Qindong holding her hand, she heard her sixth brother's voice. "Seventh sister, these people are the people I've trained to serve the immortal abode in the future. In other words, they are the waiters in the wine shop. Do you see the clothes those girls are wearing? I call them kipeos. They are the best clothes to show off a woman's perfect figure. The other big sisters in the family have all tried them on before. Why don't you find one and change into it too? A beautiful set of clothes can change a person's mood at any time." Yang Qindong didn't ask Yang Duo what she meant. He reached out and called Xiao Yin over. Bring my seventh sister to change into a qipao." "Young master, what about that Miss Hu?" Xiao Yin looked at Hu Yan, who seemed to have been left out. "If Miss Hu is willing, she can also try on a qipao. There are many different types and colors prepared. Just treat it as my apology for my earlier rudeness." Yang Qindong chuckled and turned to look at Hu Yan. On the way, Hu Yan had been teaching Yang Duo to be more generous. She had even told her to teach Yang Qindong a lesson and show him who was boss. However, when she saw the real person, she immediately softened. Yang Duo acted as if she had returned home. She didn't even wait for Hu Yan to say whether she agreed or not before grabbing her. "Come, let's go take a look at those kipeos. Let's see if they are really as beautiful as they seem." Three women made a show. Xiao Yin, Yang Duo, and Hu Yan all walked towards the rear courtyard. Yang Qindong smiled as he watched the three leave. When they were no longer in sight, he turned around. Tiger's Mane and Yang Lu were already half kneeling on the ground. "Didn't you check the carriage before?" Clearly, Yang Qindong was reprimanding them for their earlier rudeness to Hu Yan. It is this subordinate's dereliction of duty. I originally thought that since it was Miss Seven's carriage, there was no need to check it. Tiger's Mane lowered his head. He knew that he had really made a mistake this time. Fortunately, it was Miss Hu Yan who came. If it was an assassin, the sixth young master would have been in danger. The Yang clan was his own family. There was no need to check. This was Yang Qindong's previous order. There was nothing wrong with them following orders. For a moment, the sixth young master couldn't punish them. He could only shake his head and say, "Forget it. This won't happen again. In the future, we still have to check the carriage. At the very least, we can't let any bad people sneak in. Also, have you prepared the people I asked you to prepare to serve Miss Seven?" "They are ready. They are in the rear courtyard. I'll tell them to get ready immediately." Tiger's Mane knew that this matter was over. However, he definitely couldn't be so careless next time. "Good. Go and tell them to get ready." Yang Qindong nodded. Then, as if he had thought of something, he asked, "That's right. Do you know why Miss Hu Yan came here?" From the information he received from the security bureau, he already knew that Hu Yan was paying attention to him. Yang Qindong narcissistically thought that the other party probably had a good impression of him. However, even if she had a good impression of him, it was impossible for her to directly come to his door. At that time, girls weren't that open. This was especially true for young ladies of noble families. They were extremely reserved. "I don't know." Tiger's Mane shook his head. Although the capital's security bureau's capabilities were constantly increasing after investing a large amount of money, he still didn't know what had just happened to the Hu clan. "Forget it. Sco." With the idea of taking things one step at a time, Yang Qindong had Tiger's Mane and the others leave. As for himself, he returned to the large umbrella. His gaze fell on the 100 young men and women who were still practicing their stances in the distance. In the fitting room in the backyard, Xiao Yin and the other two women were currently seriously choosing the most suitable qipao for them. Among the three, it wasn't Xiao Yin's first time in this room. She was also the first to choose. It was a set of sapphire blue qipao that represented purity. When paired with her petite face, it appeared very cute. Yang Duo chose a yellow qipao with golden edges. She was tall to begin with, so wearing it on her slim body made her look even more elegant. Hu Yan took the longest time to choose. In her eyes, it seemed that every one of them was very beautiful. In front of her were beautiful clothes that she had never seen before. In the end, she still chose a white qipao. This was a color that went with all kinds of colors. When worn, it gave off a pure and flawless color that didn't even have a speck of dust. In the fitting room, there were several mirrors that were said to be divine objects in the palace. It was very good for them to see their own style through these mirrors. Of course, these mirrors couldn't be leaked out yet. Xiao Yin also explained this point to the two women. Otherwise, the mirrors in the palace wouldn't seem so noble and mysterious. However, Xiao Yin also said that mirrors like these would be circulated in the market in the future. It was just that there wouldn't be a lot of them. In accordance with the principle of rare things being valuable, this would show off their nobility. As for the mirrors, the two women only looked at them curiously. If it was any other time, perhaps they would be attracted. However, right now their attention was completely diverted by the qipao on their bodies. Right now they were looking at themselves as if they had just met each other. In their minds they never thought that one day they would be so beautiful. To say something narcissistic at this moment, even they were attracted to themselves. All right. Seeing Hu Yan and Yang Duo spin in front of the mirrors, who knew how many times, Xiao Yin smiled like a flower and said, "The ugly daughter-in-law will have to see her parents-in-law sooner or later. Let's let the young master take a look and let him give his opinion." The young master said that women wear beautiful clothes for others to see. As a man, his opinion will be more pertinent. Therefore they have more authority and qualifications to judge. These words caused Hu Yan to immediately cover her mouth and chuckle. The Dong Shui is really something. He clearly wants to take advantage of others, yet he still makes the reason sound so dignified. Could it be that miss who is afraid of letting the young master see your current appearance? As a woman, Xiao Yin had long felt that Hu Yan looked at the young master differently. However, she was already prepared to share the young master with others. Furthermore, with her status, she would be very happy if she could be a bed-warming maid in the future. Naturally, she didn't have the authority to be jealous of others. Chapter 83. Why would I be scared? Let's see then. Hu Yan seemed to be throwing a tantrum as she spoke, but she was probably the only one who knew what she was really thinking. She really wanted to see what kind of expression Yang Chendong would have when he saw her in this white qipao. In the backyard, the 100 young men and women had already switched to walking. A paper bowl was placed on top of each of their heads. In Yang Chendong's words, they had to keep the upper half of their bodies steady while walking. They absolutely couldn't allow their paper bowls to fall. If they did, they would be punished with standing for an extra hour and no meat for dinner. It wasn't a heavy punishment, but none of the 100 future employees of the Immortal abode wanted to be punished. They didn't know if they would be disqualified if they were punished too many times. If that was the case, they would have to return to their old lives. They could only eat 2 meals a day and they weren't even full. Here they could eat 3 meals a day and there was meat for every meal. They had new clothes to wear and they even had a monthly salary. Originally, Yang Chendong was staring at the crowd and pointing out their mistakes. However, when 3 graceful figures suddenly appeared in his peripheral vision, Yang Chendong was completely unable to remain calm. In his line of sight, the 3 beauties were like fairies descending to the mortal world as they walked towards him one by one. This caused his heartbeat to accelerate and his face began to heat up. Even his gaze became infatuated. Seeing Yang Chendong's dazed expression, the 3 girls couldn't help but feel amused. In the end, it was Xiao Yin who was the closest to him, who slowly walked up and whispered into his ear, "Young master, you're almost drooling." Yang Chendong, who had lost his composure, hurriedly raised his hand to wipe his mouth. However, how could he wipe anything? Only then did he realize that Xiao Yin was teasing him. He couldn't help but awkwardly say, "Yin, you're being naughty again." When she saw that Yang Chendong really was wiping his mouth, Xiao Yin skipped away with a smile. This scene also caused Yang Duo and Hu Yan to cover their mouths and laugh. "You actually dare to laugh at this young master? In order to punish you all, someone come and serve me with a brush." Yang Chendong saw that the 3 women were so beautiful, and each of them had an extraordinary temperament. It really felt like 100 flowers were blooming, and he had the idea of painting them as a memento. After Yang Qindong shouted, Tiger's mane had already turned around and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was holding a wooden frame in his hands. That was the so-called easel that the sixth young master had requested. Does Yang Qindong know how to draw? Naturally, the answer was yes. As an outstanding member of the Wolf's Fong External Operations team, drawing was a skill that must be mastered. Among them, he was best at sketching. The so-called easel was prepared according to the standard of sketching. When the easel was placed there, Yang Qindong took out a hard pencil from the warehouse and had Xiao Yin stand in front of him. Then he began to draw. After a few strokes, a rough outline appeared on the paper. This was the first time Xiao Yin had seen the young master draw. Out of absolute trust, she stood there without moving. On the other hand, Yang Duo and Hu Yen, who had nothing to do for the time being, came up to join in on the fun. When the two arrived in front of the easel and looked down, their originally playful expressions immediately turned into incomparable astonishment. With just a few strokes, an undulating and curving line was outlined. After the shape, structure, characteristics, rhythm and charm were displayed one by one, Xiao Yin seemed to come alive on the paper. What kind of drawing technique is this? Yang Duo and Xiao Yin both had extremely astonished expressions. They were both daughters of noble families and were all descendants of famous families. They understood drawing techniques and were even quite good at it. It was because of this that they were even more astonished by the ability that Yang Qindong displayed. I call it sketching. Yang Qindong raised his head slightly and gave the two girls a charming smile. Then he continued to draw and complete the rest of his work. From start to finish, it took only half the time it took to drink a cup of tea. The sketch was completed and Xiao Yin was vividly engraved on the paper. Yang Qindong stopped and nodded. Not bad. You didn't lose your skill. That's it. Wow. So beautiful. The two women saw that the painting had been completed in such a short period of time. Moreover, the painting was so accurate that Xiao Yin's most beautiful side was fully displayed. Aside from the lack of color, everything else that should be displayed was displayed. This caused them to make a fuss over nothing. Yang Qindong had heard a lot of compliments recently, so he didn't have much of a reaction. He just smiled at the two and asked, "Which one of you will go first? We can be drawn too?" Hu Yen pointed her slender finger at herself in surprise. Originally, she thought that Yang Qindong could draw Xiao Yin so quickly because they understood each other. That was why he could draw so skillfully. However, this was the first time they had met. "Of course, if you refuse, I won't force you." Yang Qindong showed a sincere smile again. He didn't want to force people to do things. "But I won't refuse." "Then draw me first." When Hu Yen heard that she could also receive such treatment, she was instantly overjoyed. Then she walked to where Xiao Yin was standing and stood with her chest puffed out. "Don't be so stiff. Act more naturally." Yang Qindong chuckled when he saw that Hu Yan's entire body seemed to have been filled with lead, resembling a zombie that had lost a portion of her spiritual energy. "Oh." Hu Yen, who was extremely obedient, quickly relaxed her body. It was also at that moment that she heard Yang Qindong's voice. "Very good. That's it. Don't move. It'll be done soon." Yang Qindong seemed to have found an excellent angle and began to paint with great vigor. In just the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Yang Qindong finished the last stroke and laughed. "It's done." He finished drawing just like that. With a trace of suspicion, Hu Yen walked over. However, at this moment Yang Qindong had already begun to draw for seventh sister, Yang Duo. Hu Yen walked over and looked at the drawing of her face and expression that had been placed to the side. The lines were so beautiful and the curves of her body were so real. It was as if they were lifelike. Her charm, cuteness, and beauty were completely reflected on the paper. At this moment she felt a little intoxicated. Thinking that the two of them had only met for the first time, how could he understand her so clearly in such a short period of time? Hu Yen couldn't help but look up. He wanted to see the appearance of this man. She wanted to understand him and imprint him deeply in her mind. When she looked up, she saw the scene of Yang Qindong seriously drawing for seventh sister. People say that people who work seriously are the most beautiful because at that time, their whole body is focused and full of charm. When she looked up, she saw this scene. The corners of his mouth slightly curled up, the confident light in his eyes, and the fact that he was able to write as fast as lightning while remaining calm as usual, coupled with his resolute face and bright eyes, all of these attracted Hu Yan. At this moment she felt as if there was a little rabbit in her arms that was jumping wildly. Done. With a wave of his hand, Yang Chendong, who finished the last stroke, laughed and said that it was done. He put down the hard pencil in his hand. Yang Duo couldn't wait any longer. She ran a few steps and came in front of her portrait. Immediately she looked like she was in a daze. People say that the person who understands you the most is yourself. But this time Yang Duo felt that this seemed to be wrong. Because from the painting she seemed to be seeing herself for the first time. Turned out that she was so beautiful. She wasn't the useless stupid girl that the Wang family said was even worse than a servant girl. Yang Duo stood there in a daze. After a while, tears flowed down from the corners of her eyes. Yang Chendong's heart softened as he looked at her. He stood up and went forward to hug seventh sister in his arms. The painting is to show your most beautiful side and preserve it for later memories. But what we should do is to cherish the present, cherish our youth, your beauty, and all the good things we have. Seventh sister, if life in the Wang family is not happy, then leave there. Believe in sixth brother, I will let Wang go divorce you. There won't be any bad memories left. It was the most basic common sense to persuade people to reconcile and not to divorce. But now, Yang Chendong was indeed persuading his seventh sister to leave her husband's family. In modern terms, it was divorce. But when Hu Yan and Xiao Yin heard this, they felt that the sixth young master was right. It wasn't abrupt at all and it wasn't annoying at all. Seventh sister in his arms was clearly moved, but in the end she clenched her teeth and shook her head. Sixth brother, I still want to try. Can you give me a bit more time? Yes, seventh sister will make the decision. Sixth brother just wants to tell you that no matter when, no matter what decision you make, sixth brother will support you unconditionally. Because in sixth brother's eyes, seventh sister will always be the best and most beautiful girl. As for the others, they can think whatever they want and see whatever they want. Even if Butcher Zhang dies, I won't eat that pig with hair. The originally very warm scene was indeed because of Yang Chendong's last proverb that broke the mood. For a moment the three women all laughed out loud, and the atmosphere at the scene also became a lot more harmonious because of this sentence. The three girls each held the painting with their own picture in their hands. They loved it so much that if anyone wanted to snatch it from them, there would be a fierce struggle. Next, with the company of the three goddess-like women, Yang Chendong felt that life was extremely comfortable. Even time seemed to pass very quickly. What's wrong? It was already time for lunch. He brought the three girls, who had changed back to their original clothes, to the front of the crop field. The four of them personally plucked several stalks of potatoes, about 40 to 50 caddies. It was the first time the three girls had done something like this. Naturally, they were very happy and couldn't stop smiling. On the other hand, the East faction guards who were in charge of watching over them were very distressed. Chapter 84. Their duty was to guard this place. Without orders from above, no one was allowed to casually approach this place and pick the fruits. However, the orders given by the higher-ups depended on the person involved. For example, Yang Chendong, the discoverer and cultivator, was definitely not an exception. The fields here all belonged to the Yang family, so of course he could do whatever he wanted. As long as it was not a large-scale harvest, even the people of the East faction guards had no right to interfere. Each of the girls carried the freshly dug potatoes and returned to the kitchen with Yang Chendong. Each yower had already prepared everything they needed. Soon the aroma spread. At noon, the four of them ate until their stomachs were round and full. They were extremely satisfied. You have to learn to share. Good things can't be eaten by yourself. When you leave, each of you bring some for your family to taste. Yang Chendong smiled as he looked at Yang Duo and Hu Yan. Seeing how they looked as if their bellies were about to burst, he couldn't help but stretch out his right hand and lightly scratch the tips of their noses. This was originally Yang Chendong's habitual action. In the past he often played like this with Xiao Yin. However, this time he was facing seventh sister Yang Duo and Hu Yan, who he had just met for the first time. Yang Duo was slightly better. She just treated it as her brother joking with her. However, Hu Yan's face immediately flushed red after being scratched. This seemingly habitual action by Yang Chendong was actually very intimate and flirtatious in her eyes. Only after he scratched her nose did Yang Chendong feel that his actions were somewhat inappropriate. However, the matter had already been done. It was too late to apologize. Instead, it would destroy this beautiful atmosphere. He immediately clapped his hands and said, "Sister Chior, bring a few of the drinks that we prepared beforehand." Chior complied. Then a few servants carried a few transparent cups and placed them on the table. The cups were transparent glasses from the future. There were a few drinks that had already been prepared. The moment the things were placed on the table, other than Xiao Yin who had already seen the transparent glass, Hu Yan and Yang Duo were once again shocked by the things in front of them. They realized that as long as they stayed in the Yang manor, there would always be all kinds of surprises waiting for them, and they were all existences that were far beyond their imagination. Don't just stare at the glass. Why don't you try this drink? Yang Qindong smiled as he looked at the shocked duo. You call this a glass? So exquisite, so beautiful. Hu Yan couldn't help but ask curiously. Yes, this is called a glass cup. It's an improved product of colored glass. It's more transparent and gives people a clearer feeling. As Yang Qindong explained, he picked up the glass in front of him and took a sip. Try it. The drinks inside are the real delicacies. I guarantee that none of you have tasted it before. Of course, no one had tasted it before. No matter if it was the apple juice, orange juice, peach juice, milk tea or fruit tea placed in front of them, none of them had ever seen or heard of them before, let alone tasted them. The three women imitated Yang Qindong and began to taste it. They couldn't stop once they tasted it. In the end, they drank until their bellies were round and full. At this moment, they were a bit regretful. If they had known earlier, they wouldn't have eaten so much at lunch. Now that there was delicious food in front of them, they could only look and not drink. It was too much of a pity. The three women ate and drank their fill. It was already the middle of the afternoon. Only then did they feel that time had passed too quickly. Thinking that they were ready to go home, Yang Duo and Hu Yan's faces revealed expressions of reluctance. Seeing the two's intentions, Yang Qindong said to Yang Duo, "Seventh sister, this is your maiden home. If you don't want to go back, just stay here." This was something that Yang Qindong could only say to Yang Duo, but he couldn't do anything about Hu Yan. If he were to ask her to stay, he would definitely be treated as a lecher. He was afraid that when night fell, Hu Zhangning would kill him with a knife. "Thank you, sixth brother. Seventh sister, I still have to go back. No matter what, I am still a member of the Wang clan." Yang Duo shook her head and rejected Yang Qindong's good intentions. However, from her words, it could be heard that she was somewhat moved by the sixth young master's suggestion. That's right. Instead of wasting her youth and beauty on Wang Go who didn't know how to cherish himself, why not learn to be herself? Were other people's opinions really that important? Knowing that seventh sister wanted to be strong before she made a decision, she had to do her own part. Yang Qindong couldn't persuade her anymore. However, he was not completely unprepared. He clapped his hands 3 times in the air, and then 10 young girls dressed like maids came in from outside. Looking at the 10 girls walking over, Yang Duo and Hu Yan were stunned. Even Xiao Yin, who didn't understand, looked at Yang Qindong with a puzzled expression. She didn't understand what the young master wanted to do. "The 10 of you, listen up. In the future, my seventh sister Yang Duo will be your master. You have to serve her with all your heart. Every month, this young master will give you 2 taels of silver as a monthly allowance. During festivals, your family will also receive some rice, noodles, and meat. In short, you will not be treated unfairly. However, if I hear that seventh sister has suffered any grievances in the Wang family in the future, then each and every one of you will be punished. Do you understand?" After the 10 people stood in place, Yang Qindong's cold voice suddenly rang out. Yang Qindong, who was like a completely different person from before, unconsciously emitted the aura of a superior person, causing Hu Yan, who was watching from the side, to be a little dazed. How could this person change so quickly? Just now he was like the sun hanging high in the sky, which could melt people. At this moment he was like the cold wind of winter, making people feel a chill go straight to the bottom of their hearts. "We understand." The 10 girls all bowed and replied in unison. Only then did the chill on Yang Qindong's body disappear. He then looked at the stunned Yang Duo and said, "Seventh sister, this is what sixth brother prepared for you. They will be by your side in the future. If you need anything, just call them. Sixth brother will settle all the expenses with them. Don't worry." With Yang Qindong's current financial resources, how many people couldn't be supported by him? It was just giving seventh sister 10 mates. It wasn't worth mentioning. As for Yang Duo, when she saw the 10 maids, she couldn't help but cry. When she married into the Wang family, there was a maid by her side. Unfortunately, after a serious illness, the maid couldn't survive and died. Only she was left alone. When she was bullied, she could only silently endure it in her heart. Ever since sixth brother appeared, everything had changed. The Wang family no longer dared to scold and beat her like before. Not only that, there were now 10 more maids. This was equivalent to raising her status all of a sudden. As such, she no longer had to worry about others giving her a hard time. This time she truly felt the warmth of a family. Sixth brother, thank you. She stretched out her hand and tightly patted Yang Qindong's big hand. Ah, seventh sister, you are my biological sister. Doing anything for you is what I should do. Alright, when you leave in the future, bring some things back. With these 10 maids, 1,000 taels a month won't be enough. I'll give you double. 2,000 taels shouldn't be a problem. When the time comes, don't have the money to reward them. That would be too embarrassing. Also, prepare some food and clothes. If you are in a bad mood, don't eat with the Yang family and just cook for yourself. But there is one thing you must not tell the other sisters. Otherwise, they will say that sixth brother favors one and discriminates against the other. When he said the last sentence, Yang Qindong had a bitter expression, as if he had suffered a great grievance. Yang Duo, who was originally very touched, was about to cry again. However, when she heard that she couldn't tell the other older sisters, she immediately pursed her lips and smiled. At that moment, she really looked back and smiled charmingly, making the 6 palaces pale in comparison. However, after laughing, Yang Duo still shook her head. You'll be paying for these maids' expenses. Seventh sister, why would I need so much money? 1,000 taels a month is more than enough to spend. Yang Duo wanted to refuse, but unexpectedly, Qiao Yin spoke up. Seventh young lady, this is a small token of appreciation from the young master. You should accept it. Qiao Yin's identity was only Yang Qindong's personal maid. Logically speaking, she didn't have the qualifications to speak up in this kind of situation. But everyone could see that the 6th young master's attitude towards her was very unusual. If things didn't go well, she might become a concubine in the future. This was equivalent to marrying into the Yang family and becoming half a Yang family member. Who would look down on her then? Right. 7th sister only needs to accept this from 6th brother. Save up the excess and use it as a dowry in the future. Yang Qindong chuckled. But when he said this, Yang Duo's face turned even redder. She even buried her head deeply. After dealing with Yang Duo's matter, Yang Qindong looked at Hu Yan. Miss Hu, thank you for accompanying my 7th sister this time to relax. In order to express my gratitude, I have prepared some things. I'll have to trouble you to bring them along when you leave. Yang Qindong didn't say what it was, and Hu Yan was smart enough not to ask. It was as if everything was in tacit agreement. An hour later, the 3 carriages slowly left the gates of the Yang village. There were 2 more carriages than when they came. Not only that, there were 5 maids standing beside each carriage. These were all going to follow Yang Duo back to the Wang family. It could be imagined that when these people arrived at the Wang family, Wang Go and that unreasonable mother, Lady Yan, would be shocked. Not to mention how Yang Duo was after returning to the Wang family. After Hu Yan entered the city, she separated from Yang Duo. Behind the carriage she was in, there was another carriage following. The coachman was Yang Lu. This carriage was a gift from Yang Qindong to Hu Yan. He said it was to thank her for bringing 7th sister out to relax. But as for the real reason, only the 2 of them knew. Chapter 85. Hu Yan, who was sitting in the carriage, had a look of joy on her face. She even thought shyly that this wouldn't be the engagement gift from Dong Shui, right? But she just didn't know what was inside. Was there the toilet paper that she promised her father? She was excited and worried all the way. When she arrived at the gate of the Hu mansion, Lieutenant Gao, who followed her, immediately asked the gatekeeper to find someone to unload the things. After the bags were unloaded, Yang Lu drove the carriage back, leaving behind Hu Zhongning, who had heard the news and rushed over with a look of surprise. Yan, what are these things? Don't tell me it's all toilet paper? Hu Zhongning asked in confusion. Father can see for himself. Daughter is tired and wants to go back to rest. She was holding a small package which contained her white Chong Sam and the sketch. In her opinion, these were the most important things. But after answering this sentence, Hu Yan didn't care what Yang Chendong gave her. She turned and left, leaving Hu Zhongning with a puzzled look. He had to let people carry the things into the courtyard first and then look at them one by one. Needless to say, there must be toilet paper in the gift, and there was a lot of it. In the morning, the housekeeper of the Hu mansion and the housekeepers of the other ministers went to Yang village to ask for toilet paper, but to no avail. Then Hu Yan appeared. Presumably they were more or less related, so this thing naturally couldn't be left out. Not only that, but there were also other good things sent, such as toothpaste, toothbrush, soap, cosmetics, and so on. There were also food such as freshly dug potatoes and boxes of canned fish. There were all kinds of flavors in the canned fish. With the geographical location of Xi'an City, fishing was not a problem at all. As long as this thing was sealed well and the taste was unique, there would naturally be no problems. The things were opened one by one, and Hu Zhongning sighed. This Yang Shima was really generous. Of course, what made him the happiest was that these were all obtained by Hu Yan. Did that mean that this kid also took a fancy to his daughter? Whether it was a match in terms of social status or talent, it seemed that the marriage between the two families was more suitable. 100 Flowers Hall. Yesterday, after the two songs were played, the reputation of this place went up a notch. Tonight there were even more people coming, which made the head procuress, Mu Lily, smile all night long. It was a pity that there were too few tables in 100 Flowers Hall, and the place was not big enough. Otherwise she would be able to earn more money. Just like before, the moment the two songs were played, everyone on the stage cheered. At the same time, voices urging them to stay rose and fell, as if they wanted to flip the roof of 100 Flowers Hall over. However, Madame Shui paid no attention to this and continued to walk down the platform. There were a total of 2 new songs. If she sang them over and over again, she was afraid that sooner or later she would get tired of listening to them. This was not what she wanted. Madame Shui walked down the platform. Many people in the crowd disagreed with her. They all shouted to express their dissatisfaction. However, among the crowd, there was a man dressed in a brocade robe. He had a pointy mouth and cheeks that resembled a monkey's cheeks. Instead, he used all of his strength to raise his hands and flip the table in front of him to the ground. Following that, he shouted, "This general didn't allow you to leave? You can try to leave." The big movement of the table being flipped naturally attracted countless people's attention. For a moment, the hall became quiet. Even Madame Shui, who was about to leave, could not help but stop and look back. It was precisely this glance that caused him to be filled with terror. She knew that man. It was Xixing, the Qianhu of the embroidered uniform guard. When it came to Xixing, not many people knew of him. However, when it came to his elder brother, very few people didn't know of him. He was the eunuch Xining, the eunuch who betrayed the great Ming dynasty and was executed by 1,000 cuts. However, the change of the Tumu castle had not happened yet. Naturally, Xining was still in power and was even favored by the emperor. He also had a good relationship with Wang Zhen, the chief steward of the ceremony directorate. With such a powerful elder brother, Xixing naturally did things without scruples. In addition, he was a Qianhu of the embroidered uniform guard, which made him even more domineering. Just last year he bullied Zhang Fu, the Duke of Ying, who had been a senior official for several dynasties and made outstanding contributions to the army. Zhang Fu did not dare to say anything and had a lot of land taken away from him. Today he was here and flipped the table. How could the others not be shocked when they saw him? Especially Zhang De, the second son of Zhang Fu, who was in the crowd. Although his eyes were full of hatred, he did not have the courage to intervene in this matter. Even Duke Ying's son did not dare to intervene. Seeing this, the others could only endure and did not dare to say a word. Xixing seemed to be very satisfied with the way people looked at him. He laughed and pointed at Madame Shui, saying, "I haven't heard enough. Sing one more time." As an entertainer, Madame Shui had seen many things like this. However, she still felt nervous. She felt that Xixing did not come just to listen to the song. He probably had other purposes. Since he was not as powerful, he had to obey. Seeing Xixing's domineering and arrogant attitude, Madame Shui knew that she could not avoid it today. She had to force a smile and bow to him. Then she turned to the stage. The procuress, Mu Lily, immediately arranged for someone to prepare a new table and send it to Xixing. Xixing then crossed his legs and raised his head, looking insufferably arrogant as he continued to listen to Madame Shui's song. "Your Excellency, Madame Shui's skin is really good. If I can hug her for one night, my life will not be in vain. The subordinate beside him flattered and looked at Madame Shui on the stage, drooling. It's not difficult. I have to be on duty tonight. Forget it. Tomorrow is my day off. I'll come here to have fun for one night. By the way, check the person behind Baihua Hall. Tell him that I like this place and want to buy it. Xing said indifferently. Even Duke Ying had been bullied by him. She was just an insignificant entertainer. How could she jump to the top? Yes, Your Excellency. I'll do it right away. The servant answered and turned to leave. A pimp who was serving tea to a guest at a nearby table had his ears pricked up. When he heard these words, he immediately revealed a look of fear. However, he quickly pretended to be calm. After thinking for a while, he went backstage. There was a limit to what a pimp could do. The benefits he could get from the kind of place he worked for were proportional. Baihua Hall's business was very good now, and they usually received a lot of rewards. However, if Madame Shui was replaced, they would get less money if something happened to her. They might not even be able to continue their business. For his own sake, he had to tell the procuress, Mu Lily, about this. Backstage, Mu Lily was looking at the stage with a worried expression. She was worried that something would happen later. As the big sister of the 100 Flowers Hall's procuress, she naturally knew what kind of person Xing was and what kind of morals he had. Miss Mu. The pimp came to Mu Lily's side and whispered in her ear what he had just heard. Then Mu Lily's expression turned into one of shock. Her originally pretty face turned pale at this moment. What should we do? Under Xing's threat, Madame Shui had to sing the 2 songs again. Fortunately, there were no more heckling. Xing walked out of Baihua Hall accompanied by several of his men. Everything seemed to be fine after the storm. Only Mu Lily, who had heard the news, knew that it was not that Xing wanted to stop, but that he had regarded Baihua Hall as his property. That was why he did not make trouble. Madame Shui went backstage, exhaled a long breath of fragrance and wiped her forehead gently. When she saw Mu Lily coming from afar, she forced a smile and said, "Sister, I'm fine." "Well, it's not fine this time. It's serious." Mu Lily sighed and told Xiao Yuxue what she had just heard from the pimp. What? Sure enough, Madame Shui, who had heard the news, didn't look any better than Mu Lily did just now. "Sister, do you think our boss can sell Baihua Hall to Xing? If it's someone else, I don't know." "But who is Xing? Last year he even dared to occupy Duke Ying's fertile land and nothing happened. I heard that the emperor punished them later, but now they have regained their prestige, haven't they?" She did not say whether it was possible or not, but the comparison between Duke Ying and Madame Shui had proved her idea. What should we do? What should we do? Madame Shui was really anxious at this moment. She had thought that she could make more money as a young actress and a top courtesan. In this way, even if she was old and could not sing anymore, she would have enough money to spend the rest of her life. She could even find a good man to marry as long as she kept her chastity. But all of this seemed to have become a flower in the mirror, the moon in the water. Once 100 Flowers Hall became Xing's property with the other party's character, he would probably eat her up that very night. Then she would become a money-making tool. Once she grew old, she would probably become useless. Madame Shui shook her head desperately at the thought of all her efforts over the years. Her face was full of unwillingness. "Yuxue, I don't want to do this. Is this our fate? We can't change it. Didn't you see that when Xing stood out, no one dared to say anything? This is the general trend. We can't change it." Mu Lily hugged Madame Shui and cried bitterly together. Chapter 86. No. There must be a way. There must be a way. Lady Snow shook her head, unwilling to accept such a fate. She had just learned 2 new songs from Dong Shui, and the whole capital knew about her. Seeing that everything was going well, she was unwilling to let her dream end before it even began. Yes, Dong Shui. For some reason, Yang Qindong's handsome and confident face flashed through Lady Snow's mind. The capital in the 9th month was not as hot as it was during the day at night, and when the cold wind blew, one would feel a chill. Outside the Yang village, Yang Qindong had washed up and was about to go to bed. At this time, Tiger's Mane's voice came from outside. "Young master, Lady Snow wants to see you." "What is she doing here so late at night?" Hearing that Lady Snow was here, he looked at the time. The curfew should have started in the capital. It would be very difficult for Lady Snow to return to 100 Flowers Hall at this time. While Yang Qindong was still thinking about what could make a girl come to him so late at night, Tiger's Mane's voice sounded again. Young master, do you need me to wake Xiao Yin up and ask her to come? No need. Yang Qindong waved his hand. He had arranged for Xiao Yin to go to bed first. In his own words, women were made of water. If they wanted good skin, they needed good sleep. It was precisely this sentence that caused this habit to become a natural one. Unless there was something special, Xiao Yin would go to bed early. Right now, Xiao Yin was probably already asleep. Without knowing what the other party wanted, it wouldn't be appropriate to rashly wake Xiao Yin up. Forget it. Bring her to the study. Yang Qindong thought for a while, put on his coat and then strolled toward the study. When Tiger's Mane took Lady Snow to the study, Yang Qindong was writing something with his head down. If someone was there, they would know that he was writing a classic play, The Legend of the White Snake, which was later made into a TV series and remade several times. It was also called The New Legend of the White Snake. Madame Snow was brought in. She was wrapped in a long robe, but she was wearing a pair of embroidered shoes that were convenient for walking on the platform. It could be seen that she had come out in a hurry. Is something the matter? She slowly raised her head and looked at Madame Shui from head to toe. She sighed that no matter what she dressed up, she could always attract men's attention. Madame Shui, who had been afraid and anxious, calmed down a lot after Yang Qindong looked at her. He didn't know why. But when she thought of the problems that 100 Flowers Hall might face, she knelt on the ground with a plop. Dong Shui, save me. Please save Lady Shui. If there's anything, get up and talk. Yang Qindong put down the writing brush in his hand and looked at Madame Snow. What's the matter? Tell me in detail. Madame Snow lowered her head and cried. He was really pitiful. While crying softly, she told him what had happened in 100 Flowers Hall in the evening. She also told him what the pimp had overheard and what Mu Lily had said to her. Xing. When Yang Qindong heard the name, he felt it was familiar. But he had only been in the capital for a few days. How could he know everyone? In particular, Xing was just a Qianhu of the Brocade Guard, a nobody in his eyes. Seeing Yang Qindong's confusion, Tiger's Mane, who was standing next to him, quickly took out a book. After searching for a while, he found Xing's name. He handed the book to Yang Qindong. Young master, please take a look. He took the book and saw Xing's name. The investigation of the Security Bureau was written on it. Humph. What the hell? When Yang Qindong saw that Xing had a brother named Xining, he remembered this person. Xining was a famous traitor in history. Because of him, the capital was almost captured. Seriously speaking, if Yu Qian hadn't stood up for him, the whole capital would have fallen because of him. At that time, the history of the Great Ming Dynasty would have been rewritten. When Yang Qindong got angry, Tiger's Mane naturally emitted a murderous aura. Young master, do you need me to go to the city now to find this person and then? Madame Snow knelt in front of him. Obviously, she couldn't see Tiger's Mane's beheading gesture. But Yang Qindong saw it clearly. Oh, it's not necessary. At this time, you still have to go to the city. However, I'm afraid that you'll still have to make a trip into the city. Do you know who the current owner of 100 Flowers Hall is? Young master, it's Fan Ling. He was the vice director of the Ministry of War, a secondary class level 5 official. His father used to be the minister of Honglu Temple. As expected of the director of the Security Bureau, Tiger Shine, who had slowly gotten into his role, quickly reported the other party's identity. Of course, all this had a close relationship with 100 Flowers Hall that Yang Qindong had paid attention to. Find him and buy Madame Snow's slave contract. Yang Qindong made a decision after a short hesitation. It was not the right time to have a direct conflict with a villain like Xing. At least he couldn't look for trouble. There was only one way to solve the problem, which was to buy Madame Snow. In this way, even if Xing got 100 Flowers Hall, he would only get an empty shell. Yes. Tiger's Mane immediately understood the meaning of the sixth young master. He answered and turned to leave. Wait. Madame Snow suddenly said. She came to Yang Qindong for help, but it was just an impulsive act. She didn't have any hope. Dong Shui was powerful, but he was only talented. Compared to power, he was much weaker. She didn't think that the sixth young master could do anything to Xing, who even Duke Ying, a hero of the Great Ming Dynasty, couldn't afford to offend. However, she never thought that Yang Qindong would agree to her request so easily. Moreover, he even wanted to buy her slave contract directly. Amidst his excitement he thought of his elder sister, Mu Lily. If he left and his elder sister did not, he could imagine how Xing would treat him. It would be a fate worse than death. There was also her maid Xiao Wei. She had been using her for so many years, so she couldn't give her up. At this time, Madame Snow didn't realize that she came to ask for help. She didn't have such awareness. She just thought about how to take her family members to her side, so she shouted, "Wait. Is there anything else?" Yang Qindong looked at Madame Snow with a puzzled expression. Did she still want to stay in 100 Flowers Hall? If so, it would be more difficult to help her. Yes, please understand, Dong Shuai. This servant still has my elder sister Mu Lily and the maid Xiao Wei in 100 Flowers Hall. If this servant leaves alone. Yang Qindong understood that this was a loyal and affectionate Madame Snow. He liked this kind of person. He immediately said to Tiger's Mane, who was still standing there, "Did you hear that? There are 3 people in total. By their slave contracts. Don't be afraid to spend money. Go." Yes. Tiger's Mane answered and turned to leave. As for how to enter the city in the middle of the night, it was not a problem for Yang Qindong, the #1 master beside him. The matter was solved. Although she didn't see the answer, Madame Snow couldn't help but trust Yang Qindong. Especially at this time, the confidence he showed made her feel infatuated. Only the 2 of them were left in the room. Suddenly, there was a very awkward and ambiguous atmosphere in the study. Yang Qindong was the first to feel the difference. At this time he regretted that he didn't let Tiger's Mane take Madame Snow to rest first, so he wanted to call for help. He knew that even if Tiger's Mane wasn't here for the time being, Beta Persei, Yangxi and the others would be outside. It could be said that whenever he needed they would appear at any time. But for some reason, Yang Qindong didn't want to let anyone take Madame Snow away. In this very contradictory mood, he looked at Madame Snow and said unconsciously, "Well, I'll arrange for someone to take you to rest." This was obviously not an order but a tone of negotiation. Madame Snow was delighted, but she quickly shook her head. "No, I'm not sleepy now. What are you writing, Dong Shuai?" After saying this, Madame Snow stood up and walked to Yang Qindong leisurely. Faced with Madame Snow's approach, Yang Qindong, who could remain calm even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, could clearly feel his heart beating faster at this moment. In order to ease the awkwardness, he casually said, "I'm writing a story about love." Really? Dong Shuai's literary talent has long been known in the capital. I wonder if I have the luck to read it first? It seemed that she was asking, but when she finished speaking she had taken the initiative to walk to Yang Qindong's side and bent down. Because the temperature in the study was suitable, Madame Snow had already taken off her coat and robe. At this time she was wearing a wide-collared top. When she lowered her head, Yang Qindong saw a touch of Snow White looming in front of him. Some things couldn't be ignored just because you didn't want to. On the contrary, some things you said you didn't want to think about, but you couldn't help thinking about it in your heart. At this time Yang Qindong was obviously the latter. His eyes followed the touch of Snow White and seemed to see 2 tall mountains. Madame Snow's skin was very white. Among all the women he knew, only Hu Yen could be compared with her. As the saying went, 100 ugliness could cover up 100 ugliness, not to mention that Madame Snow was a first-class beauty. Against the dim light of the oil lamp in the study, she really made people feel that they were looking at a beauty under the lamp. The more they looked at her, the more attracted they were. Madame Snow seemed to be looking down at Yang Qindong's manuscript, but in fact she had been paying attention to his changes. Although she was a performer and not a prostitute, she had heard and seen a lot of things in the red light district, so she naturally knew how to interact with men. Chapter 87. At this moment, Madame Shui felt that the man beside her began to breathe heavily. His unique breath made Madame Shui's heart beat rapidly. He was handsome, talented, capable, domineering, confident, and had a good family background. When these advantages were concentrated on one person, it would naturally make him shine with incomparable brilliance. Not to mention that Yang Qindong was a hero who had just saved a beauty. Madame Shui was already in love with him. It was undoubtedly very important for her to find a man she could entrust her life to. Now the man was right in front of her. What should she do? What would he do? Whether it was to repay the kindness or to repay the professor's kindness, should she devote herself to him? Or should she give herself to him? Both of them had pure bodies. In this kind of atmosphere, neither of them took the initiative to speak. Neither of them had the intention to break the ice. However, both of them were well aware of each other's thoughts. For a moment this kind of feeling was indescribable, but it was indeed extremely wonderful. Madame Shui remained motionless. She had been bending over for half a cup of tea's time, waiting for Yang Chendong to do something. She heard from the other sisters that at this time shouldn't the man be more active? But why didn't Dong Shui do anything? Yang Chendong was indeed hesitating. Logically speaking, he should have carried her in a domineering manner. His bedroom was not far away from the study, and then everything would have gone smoothly. There was even a voice in his heart urging him to do so, and even his body was supporting such a thought. However, Yang Chendong did not do so. Perhaps it was because of his conservative thinking. He thought that if he had sex with Madame Shui, it would be more or less taking advantage of her. He did not want to do so. He preferred success to come naturally. However, Yang Chendong also knew that if he persisted in this atmosphere he was afraid that he would not be able to control his heart. Therefore he gritted his teeth and said, "Madame Shui, it's a little late. I should go to bed." "Really? It just so happens that Shui is also sleepy. Why don't you let me warm Dong Shui's bed?" Madame Shui was overjoyed. She thought that Yang Chendong said it on purpose for her to hear. How could she not take advantage of the situation and go downhill like a donkey? Originally he wanted to find an excuse to separate them so that he could calm down. He never thought that it would lead to such a result. If he said no at this time it would be too hurtful. Yang Chendong helplessly nodded and said, "All right then." The two of them walked out of the study one after the other and went to the bedroom. A figure slowly retreated from the darkness. Even if he wanted to protect the sixth young master he still had to consider the situation. Sometimes if he still wanted to exist, then it would not be protection but rather it would be a nuisance. Yang Chendong sensed that the eyes that were secretly watching him had left. He knew that from now on only Madame Shui and himself were left. He could not help but feel a little restless. Should he really do something? Or is my manhood coming to an end tonight? Dong Shui, I'll go in first. While Yang Chendong was still thinking about what to do next, Madame Shui had taken off her clothes and then plunged into the quilt. At that moment Yang Chendong caught a glimpse of her snow-white body. His heart suddenly skipped a beat. Yang Chendong involuntarily got up and walked slowly to the bed. Yang Chendong's heart was beating faster and faster. Madame Shui, who had already slipped into the quilt, was also heartbeat faster. She even blushed from her face to her neck. Then she slowly closed her eyes, but her long eyelashes were still trembling, indicating that she was not asleep and had no intention of falling asleep. Yang Chendong finally finished walking a few steps. He involuntarily stretched out his arm. When he was about to touch the snow-white body that was bowing her head and even trembling, he forced himself to say, "Madame Shui, I'm not used to being warmed by someone." "Oh." Before he could finish his sentence, he saw a snow-white arm emerge from the blanket and wrap around his neck. A strong force assaulted him, causing Yang Chendong to uncontrollably burrow into the blanket along with his clothes. At the same time, a pair of gentle jade lips lightly touched Yang Chendong's lips, causing him to be unable to spit out a single word. The sweet liquid stirred in her mouth. Madame Shui, who was a little clumsy, tried her best to release the strength and courage of her first kiss. Yang Chendong cooperated with her. At first he was passive but soon he took the initiative. It seemed that the kiss could not satisfy him, so he turned around and pressed himself on her. Then he stared into Madame Shui's beautiful eyes and said, "Do you know that I'm in a wolf's den? How dare you take the initiative to provoke me? Have you thought about the consequences?" "No, and there's no need to think about it. It's my fortune to give myself to Dong Shui," Madame Shui said, panting. She seemed to have drained all her strength just now. At this moment she did not know what to do except wait passively. Madame Shui's words made Yang Chendong's hormones rise. Since he was not afraid of a woman, what was there to be afraid of? If he abandoned her at this time he would not be a beast but worse than a beast, just like the story said. Yang Chendong made up his mind. He felt that his body had reached its limit, so he decided to release it. He slowly lowered his head and moved closer and closer to Madame Snow. When Yang Chendong thought that it was a matter of course, he suddenly noticed a drop of tear from the corner of Madame Shui's eye. It was this tear that cooled down Yang Qindong's burning body in an instant. What was he doing? Madame Shui came to him because she was bullied, but he wanted to sleep with her. In this way, what was the difference between him and Xixing, who wanted to bully her? Even if they were congenial, it couldn't be now. Otherwise, there would inevitably be a knot in his heart, which might accompany him for the rest of his life. Well, we're both tired today. You can rest here. I'll go to another room. Finally, Yang Qindong resisted the impulse and said such a manly sentence, at least he thought so. Then he got up and was about to leave. But the same arm stretched out across the air. Dong Shui, forgive me, okay? I really haven't thought it through. I'm still worried about Sister Mu and Wei, I understand. Go to sleep. When you wake up tomorrow you can pretend that nothing happened. Yang Qindong sighed. Madame Shui had something on her mind. Fortunately, he didn't sleep with her at this time. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would feel guilty for the rest of his life. Well, seeing that Yang Qindong was about to leave, Madame Shui was unwilling to let him go. She was just not ready, and she was worried about Mu Lily and Wei. That was why she couldn't devote herself to him. But in the end she really didn't hate Yang Qindong. He even liked him. It was just that today was not the right time. But she couldn't give her all, and she couldn't let the sixth young master leave. Otherwise, who knew whether this man would be angry or not? If so, she was afraid that she couldn't find a way to make up for it. I'm scared. I'm willing to ask Dong Shui to stay with me. Can you hold me and sleep until dawn? He could only hold her but couldn't do anything. If it were other men, they wouldn't agree. Weren't you testing me? But Yang Qindong unexpectedly agreed. Maybe he really had a good impression of Madame Shui, or maybe he also wanted to feel what it was like to sleep with a beauty in his arms. Of course, there was another possibility. The sixth young master was really sleepy. Don't scold the prodigal. No matter what the reason was, Yang Qindong fell asleep with Madame Shui, who was only wearing a doudou. During this time their heads were very close, but in the end they really didn't do anything. They even had sweet and quiet smiles on their faces. Early the next morning, after Xiao Yin got up, she first took a look at the courtyard. She didn't see the sixth young master, who was exercising. She couldn't help but be very curious, so she went to the bedroom. Here, although Beta Persei was guarding, he didn't stop Xiao Yin when he saw her coming. He just turned a blind eye, but his ears were already pricked up, as if he knew what was going to happen next. Sure enough, just 3 seconds after Xiao Yin entered the sixth young master's bedroom, there was a scream. Following that, Xiao Yin staggered out of the bedroom, her face pale and powerless. After that, she leaned against the door and covered her face and cried. This scene fell into the eyes of Beta Persei, who was hiding in the dark, and he quickly closed his eyes. As a close guard who didn't know Xiao Yin's feelings for the young master. But now, another woman had taken the lead, so it was reasonable for her to be sad. Not long after Beta Persei closed his eyes, Yang Qindong, who had changed his clothes, appeared in front of the door. He reached out and helped the tearful Xiao Yin up, then whispered something in her ear. In an instant the rain turned into sunshine and Xiao Yin's face turned into a smile. Ha ha ha. Yang Qindong laughed after seeing this, then shouted to the dark, "What are you looking at? Why aren't you running with the young master?" Beta Persei, who was hiding in the dark, didn't know what kind of trick the young master was playing, but when he heard the order he appeared in a flash and followed Yang Qindong. This caused Xiao Yin to be very happy, as if she had made a big mistake. The two of them went out of the courtyard, one after the other, and went straight to the backyard's playground. Leaving behind Xiao Yin, who had already changed into a smile, he turned around and entered the house. Then his laughter echoed throughout the bedroom. Chapter 88. Xiao Yin was very happy because the young master had told her that he had only comforted Mama Shui. Although he liked Mama Shui as much as he liked her, he did not want her. If you don't believe me, you can go into the house and check. You can even ask Mama Shui to dance as a test. If she had really lost her real body last night, how could she have the energy to dance? Her body probably wouldn't allow it. Because of this, Xiao Yin easily believed Yang Qindong. She even thought that if the young master needed anything, he would definitely look for her first. After all, they had been in a relationship for many years. Yes, that must be it. After the backyard was settled, Yang Qindong seemed to be much lighter when he started running. Beta Persei, who was following behind him, was very curious. How could he still be so energetic after a tiring night? Of course, Yang Chendong didn't need to explain this to him. After returning from the 5-kilometer run, Xiao Yin had already prepared the bath water. But this time there was an extra helper by her side, Mama Shui. After the bath, the three of them had a peaceful and pleasant breakfast together. Tiger's mane appeared again, and not only that, but also the charming Mu Lily and the maid Little Wire followed behind him. Sister Mu Little Wire. The three women were very excited to see each other. Tiger's mane stepped forward and said, "Young master, it's all done. These are the 3 slave contracts." As he spoke, he placed 3 pieces of paper with official seals and handprints in front of Yang Chendong. "Well, you've worked hard. Go and rest." Yang Chendong waved his hand. Originally, he could directly burn these 3 slave contracts, but in this way the 3 of them would not be able to get rid of their lowly status for the rest of their lives. "Greetings, Dong Shui." After the 3 women met, they all knelt in front of Yang Chendong with grateful expressions. "Get up, all of you. From now on you have to abide by the rules here. Don't kneel if you don't need to." Yang Chendong said helplessly. He really didn't like this etiquette of kneeling when meeting people. Unfortunately, everyone seemed to be willing to play this game. For example, Tiger's mane and the others beside him, he didn't know how many times he had said it, but it still didn't work at all. They still knelt when meeting people. Xie Dong Shui. Whether or not the 3 girls would kneel in the future no one knew, but their thanks were very sincere. "Alright, since you've left 100 Flower Hall, you're now part of my Yang family. I don't keep idle people here. This is a new story I've written. You can think of how to act it out together. These are the manuscripts. You can study them yourselves. If there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me." She took out the script of The Legend of White Snake that she had prepared a long time ago. There was a very clear plan for the distribution of roles. With this, she could play the roles of Lady Snow and Mu Lily, the former top courtesan. Did they know that this was a job for them? The 3 girls hurriedly agreed, then took the manuscripts and went to the backyard. When only Xiao Yin was left, she walked up softly. "Young master, although they've left 100 Flower Hall, they're still lowly. Young master knows. I'll find a way to change their names." Yang Chendong rubbed his head as he spoke. Changing their names was easy to say but difficult to do, especially when they were targeted by Xisheng. If he found out that someone had changed Lady Snow and the others' names, he would definitely come looking for trouble. How could he solve this problem? "Young master, there's a eunuch called Mao Mu outside the manor. He said that he's an old friend of yours." Just as Yang Chendong was thinking about how to do this at the lowest cost, Beta Persei appeared and reported Mao Mu's visit. "Oh, it's him. Someone sent me a pillow when I was sleepy. Please." After hearing who it was, Yang Chendong's face was full of smiles. "Is it a eunuch? Does young master want him to do this?" But Xisheng's brother is also a eunuch. Xiao Yin was very smart. Looking at the young master's expression, she knew what he was thinking, but she still reminded him with some worry. "It's okay. The relationship between eunuchs is not that united. Young master knows." Yang Chendong said confidently. As the saying goes, evil people need evil people to deal with evil people. Originally, he thought about whether he should use some kind of thunderous method to make Xisheng disappear, but he didn't expect Mao Mu to come at this time. That was the best thing that could happen. In the study, Yang Chendong gave Mao Mu a very high level of courtesy and met him here. Being able to meet in the study meant that the 2 sides had a close relationship. Mao Mu, who was very familiar with this, was very excited. Although the eunuch group was very powerful now, there was Wang Zhen and his henchmen above them. In addition, there was another force, Jining, and a few other small forces. He was just one of them who was not famous. Yang Chendong was now in the limelight. Even Chief Steward Wang Zhen had to look up to him. Logically speaking, this person did not have to treat him like this at all. It would be understandable if he just sent someone to talk to him. However, at this time he was meeting him in a private place like the study. The meaning of this was already obvious. "Lord Yang." As soon as the 2 sides met, Mao Mu cupped his fists and looked very respectful. "Eunuch Mao, you don't have to be like this. We are considered old friends. In the future you can call me the 6th young master or Dong Shui to others." Yang Chendong's face was full of smiles. He looked like an old friend as he spoke. "Good, Dong Shui is a good name. If possible, I will call you Lord Yang, Dong Shui from now on." Mao Mu's ability to follow the flow was not low. When he saw Yang Qindong being so polite, he immediately agreed. Ah, good. Since you are an old friend, I will definitely not treat you unfairly. Men, bring the things here. Yang Qindong laughed loudly as if he was very satisfied with Mao Mu's attitude. Then two people walked in from outside the study. Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei carried a heavy wooden box and placed it in the center of the study. You can leave. Yang Qindong said casually, then gave Mao Mu a look that said, you know what I mean. This is. Mao Mu was very curious. After getting Yang Qindong's permission, he stood up from the chair, walked to the wooden box and reached out to open it. There was a flash of white light. It turned out to be a box of silver ingots. Looking at the quantity, there were at least 5,000 silver ingots. This is. Mao Mu was indeed a little dizzy from the silver ingots, but he was even more surprised. He did not understand why Dong Shuai would think so highly of him. He originally came here to ask for a favor, but before he could even open his mouth, the other party had already given him benefits. This made him unable to speak his next words. Seeing the surprise in Mao Mu's eyes as well as the trace of greed in them, Yang Qindong laughed loudly and said, Eunuch Mao, I said that since we are good friends, there is no reason for us not to be friends. I'm just giving Eunuch Mao these. I hope that Eunuch Mao can rise to the top. This way, as a good friend, I can also bask in the glory. His words were clear. This was to make use of each other. However, with your current status and identity, Mao Mu, it is far from enough. Therefore, I support you and support you to have more power. In the future, we can all be on equal footing and do great things together, right? In the face of Yang Qindong's initiative to show goodwill, Mao Mu had no reason to reject it. He had always believed that he had the ability. What he lacked was only the opportunity and enough foundation. What was the foundation? That was to have enough background for him to use. In the palace, scheming were the most important, but money was equally important. If you don't have money, there won't be anyone willing to risk their lives for you. Naturally, it will be difficult for you to do anything. Now Yang Qindong took out more than 5,000 silver ingots. For the current Mao Mu, this was not a small amount of wealth. With this, he could rope in more people in the palace for his use. He did not dare to say that he could do great things, but it was not a problem for him to do some small things in private. As for the other need, which was the so-called opportunity with Yang Qindong, he could use this opportunity to become the link between Dong Shuai and Director Wang Zhen. After all, there were some small matters that the two of them couldn't possibly talk about in person. In that case, his role in this matter would increase, and at the same time, it would also expose the fact that he met Chief Steward Wang Zhen frequently. This was an opportunity. Seeing that Yang Qindong could make up for what he lacked, Mao Mu looked at the sixth young master. At this moment, when Mao Mu looked at the sixth young master, he felt like he was looking at his biological parents. Dong Shuai. With a plop, Mao Mu knelt down in front of Yang Qindong. Yang Qindong's eyes lit up. This person's ability to judge the situation was not bad. He knew when to lower his head. Feeling that he had found the right person, he was satisfied. He pretended to be panicked and asked, Eunuch Mao, what are you doing? However, Yang Qindong was only talking and did not have the intention to help him up. Seeing this, Mao Mu knew that he had to express his attitude. Since he had already knelt down, what was the point of saying some words to show his loyalty? Dong Shuai, this old servant is grateful for your appreciation. In the future, if there's anything you need, feel free to say it. Blade Mountain Flame Sea Guild only needs a word from Dong Shuai, and this old servant will do his best to accomplish it. His face was full of sincerity. Replacing this old servant with this old servant was already a way to express his loyalty. Until now, Yang Qindong was satisfied and bent down to support Mao Mu. Eunuch Mao, what are you doing? I said that we are friends. Thank you, Dong Shuai. Taking the opportunity to stand up, Mao Mu knew that he had passed the first test. From now on, he was Dong Shuai's man, sharing honor and disgrace. After becoming friends, there were naturally some things that were less roundabout. Mao Mu talked about the matter of diapers. He used himself as a witness to prove the importance of this thing to eunuchs. This time he wanted to get some more so that he could use them for himself, offer them to Steward Wang Zhen and sell some for money. Chapter 89. That's not a problem. I can naturally provide you and Wang Zhen for free, but I can't do that for the other eunuchs. You have to know that the cost of making this thing is very high, and it's not something from the great Ming dynasty. Comes from the sea. Do you understand? Yang Qindong pretended to be mysterious as he spoke. When Mao Mu heard that the thing came from the sea, he immediately understood. During the great Ming dynasty's maritime ban, once it came into contact with the sea, it would be a huge expense. Dong Shuai, this old servant, understands. I will sell this thing at a high price in the imperial palace. After all, there is no free lunch in the world. If you want to get something, you have to pay a price. Very good. Seeing that Mao Mu was so understanding, Yang Qindong nodded approvingly. Go back and do your job well. If you need anything, just tell me. This young master will do his best to satisfy you. By the way, there is something I need you to do. These are 3 lowly women. I need to raise their status and make them into good people. Is there any problem? Yang Qindong said with a smile as he placed 3 contracts in front of Mao Mu. These 3 people may have offended Xining and his brother. You have to think about it carefully. Mao Mu's hand had already reached out and was about to touch the contracts when he suddenly heard Yang Qindong's words. His hand paused in midair, but he quickly continued to reach out. Don't worry, Dong Shuai. Although it's a little troublesome, Xining's power in the palace is not small. However, there are still many people who don't like him. As long as the money is in place, there won't be any problems. Then let's get it done quickly. How much money do you need? Yang Qindong nodded. Xining was indeed powerful, but if this Mao Mu that he found couldn't solve such a small matter with the help of a large sum of money, then there was really no meaning in supporting him. What he needed was a helper, someone who could do things. For this he was willing to pay the price. However, if the other party was a pile of mud, then there was no point in supporting him. Mao Mu was very clear that this was the first time Dong Shuai had given him something to do. If he did it well, his future would be limitless. If he messed it up, he might not even be able to guarantee his current position. Even if it was for himself, he had to do it well, and he had to do it beautifully. Mao Mu left with 5,000 taels of silver and a pile of diapers. Compared to when he came, he seemed to have straightened his chest when he left, and it was clear that he was full of ambition. Xixing had been on duty for most of the night. When he was off duty, he slept all the way until lunch. When he was full and energized, he brought a few of his subordinates and headed straight for the home of Fan Ling, the minister-counselor of the Ministry of War. Last night, Tiger's Mane had suddenly appeared and used an unimaginable amount of money to buy the slave contracts of Lady Shui and the other 2. Fan Ling had already had the idea of exchanging 100 Flowers Hall. Without a pillar, 100 Flowers Hall could no longer regain its former glory. Although he could find new people to train again, how long would that take? Ever since his old father Fan Da passed away, the influence of the Fan family was far from what it used to be. This also made Fan Ling want to withdraw from the red light district. He was wondering who to find next. At this time Xixing came. Although the price he offered was not high or even a little low, Fan Ling still sold 100 Flowers Hall without any hesitation. It was still the same sentence. Without Lady Shui, 100 Flowers Hall had lost its greatest value. Making a move in time might be the best choice. Xixing did not expect things to go so smoothly. He offered a relatively low price and waited for Fan Ling to raise the price. Then everyone would bargain for a while. As long as the other party did not ask for too much, he would accept a price that was about the same. Last night, 100 Flowers Hall was very lively. In his eyes, a deal that could get both the beauty and money was suitable. However, Fan Ling was actually so tactful. Even when faced with the low price he offered, he still accepted it. This allowed him to pay a lot less in terms of cost. At this moment, it was as if he could already see a mountain of gold placed in front of him. Of course, there was also that white and beautiful body waving at him. After leaving Fan Manor, Xixing took the contract of 100 Flowers Hall and found a place to have a good drink with a few of his men. He decided not to rush to make the matter public. He would go to 100 Flowers Hall in the evening and give Madame Shui a surprise. After knowing the truth, her face would become extremely beautiful. The group of people drank a lot of wine. In the end, their bodies were swaying a little. Only then did they support each other to reach the 100 Flowers Hall. However, once they entered, the atmosphere was very different from yesterday. Although there were still many people, they were all noisy and angry. Some of the people who came today were former regulars of 100 Flowers Hall, but most of them came for the 2 new songs. When they arrived here with a large sum of money full of expectations, they heard that Madame Shui had disappeared. Even Mu Lily, the procuress, was nowhere to be found. How could they let it go? They began to shout one by one. What are you shouting for? Seeing the chaotic atmosphere in the hall, Xixing placed his saber on the table in front of him and roared loudly after a loud noise. This move was indeed effective. As soon as this voice came out, the originally noisy scene suddenly became much quieter. Everyone stared at Xixing, their eyes were filled with confusion. What was this person doing here again? Why was he acting all high and mighty? This shout shocked everyone. Xixing was very proud. He liked the feeling of being the center of attention. Okay, stop shouting. If you have any problems, tell me. I will solve it for you. By the way, I forgot to tell you that 100 Flowers Hall will be mine from now on. This is the contract of the transaction. In order to achieve the effect of justice, Xixing took the initiative to show the contract in front of everyone. Immediately, several people of status came forward. After reading the contract, they all nodded at the same time. Among them was Wang Si, the editor of the Hanlin Academy. Shi Qianhu, since this place is already your property, may I ask if you still want to sing tonight? If you sing, of course, we'll pay the same amount of money. We'll spend it however we want. But if you don't sing, we will leave now. No matter how powerful you are, you can't force us to pay 1 tael of silver here. Wang Si's grandfather was the current minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Wang Ji. With such a relationship, he was not afraid of a small Qianhu of the brocade guard. Even if this person's brother was very favored by the emperor, his pride as a scholar made him not shrink back. That's right, that's right. With someone taking the lead, the people below naturally chimed in. No one was afraid of spending money, but spending money wrongly and becoming a sucker wasn't something anyone wanted to do. Xixing did not care about Wang Si's criticism. Smelling of alcohol, he said complacently, "Who said I won't sing? Since I bought this place, of course I want to make money. How can I destroy my own livelihood? Well, I will go to the procuress, Mu Lily, now and ask her to arrange Madame Shui to sing for everyone. Not only that, but she will sing 3 or 5 times today to let everyone enjoy it." In order to prove his courage as a new boss and win people's hearts, Xixing announced loudly. His answer also attracted loud applause from the guests. They all said that Xixing was a righteous and heroic person. Everyone's compliments made Xixing feel even more confused. He laughed heartily and arranged for his subordinates to find Mu Lily. This time he was going to order the beauties around as the boss. After all, he was not the first person to ask about Mu Lily and Madame Shui's whereabouts. When the subordinate ran back and whispered something in Xixing's ear, Xixing's face suddenly turned gloomy as he roared, "What's going on? They ran away." "Yes, they were taken away in the morning." The subordinate answered carefully for fear that Xixing would stab him in anger. They were taken away in the morning? Who did it? Xixing had sobered up a lot. His intuition told him that things were not so simple. Why was it that as soon as he made his move, someone else beat him to it? Furthermore, he had just announced the fact that as soon as he became the new owner of 100 Flowers Hall, the flower pillar under him had disappeared without a trace. This was already not only cutting off his source of income, but also slapping him in the face, and it was an extremely resounding slap. If this matter could not be solved, he was afraid that he would become a laughing stock in the capital. No one could accept that kind of result. In the face of Xixing's questioning, the few subordinates naturally kept silent, revealing a look of bewilderment. "Investigate. Investigate for this lord. Whether it's to the heavens or to the earth, find out for me." Xixing's roar resounded in the hall of 100 Flowers Hall. At this moment he was really furious. Xixing was enraged. As a result, a few of his subordinates scattered in all directions. Along with them, the other players also left. Since they couldn't listen to the music anymore, who would stay here and be Xixing's next punching bag? Of course, Xixing's subordinates did not run away. They went to investigate the whereabouts of Madame Shui and Madame Shui. The strength of the embroidered uniform guards was very strong. In less than 2 hours they got the news and came back. Seeing his subordinates come back excitedly, Xixing knew that the result was out. He immediately asked with a fierce look, "Tell me, where did they go?" At this moment Xixing felt that he had lost face. What he wanted to do most now was to catch Madame Shui and Mu Lily, and then use all kinds of means to let them know how regretful it was to offend him. Sir, there's news. It said that they went to the Xianxia village 15 miles south of the city. A subordinate ran up and reported as if he had received a reward. Chapter 90. Yang Village. Hearing that she was not in the capital but out of it, Xianxia's eyes were filled with anger, but at the same time he was very happy. As an entertainer, she didn't stay in her own place of business. Instead, she ran around and even left the capital. Just based on this, he could use legal means to deal with her without being afraid of taking any responsibility. Let's go to Yang Village to catch her. He quickly made a decision in his mind. He would catch her immediately and bring her back with thunderous means. First, he would get the beauty, then the money, and then his reputation. He would let everyone know the consequences of provoking him. Before the curfew in the city, Xianxia went out of the city. In addition to his original 4 or 5 subordinates, he mobilized soldiers from 2 small banners. In total, more than 20 people rushed to the south of the city. As soon as Xianxia and the others went out of the city, they were seen by a pair of dormant eyes. There were fast horses galloping on a short road. They were spies of the security bureau. They had been paying attention to the movements of 100 Flowers Hall. Xianxia went out of the city. Seeing that his destination was Yang Village, their task was to send the news back to the village. In Yang Village, Yang Qindong was watching Madame Snow sing the new song by Suzhen at the foot of Mount Qingqing in the backyard. However, no matter how he looked at it, Madame Snow could not enter the stage. She looked absent-minded. Alas! Knowing what Xianxia was worried about, Yang Qindong shook his head. Sure enough, he could not do anything if his mind was not calm. Since that was the case, he could only wait for Xianxia to take the initiative to fall into the net. However, he did not know whether Xianxia would come here in anger. If he did not come, wouldn't it be troublesome? Yang Qindong did not like to wait passively. He preferred to take the initiative to attack. After not getting any news from Xianxia, Yang Qindong even thought of secretly sending someone to kill Xianxia. All he needed was a new sniper rifle and a spotter. It was guaranteed that he could easily take care of this person from 1,000 meters away. No one would know. Report. Tiger's man's figure appeared in the backyard. His appearance immediately attracted everyone's attention. Young master, Xianxia has brought over 20 embroidered uniform guards and is rushing towards us. Tiger's mane said excitedly as he half-knelt and cupped his hands. Obviously this did not scare him. On the contrary, he was very excited. Okay. Yang Qindong was also excited after hearing this. Is it finally here? Let's go out and welcome him. Yang Qindong laughed and walked out of the backyard in his cyan robe, leaving Mu Lily, Madame Shui and Little Wire in a panic. Fortunately, Qiao Yin also stayed here. She had followed the 6th young master to Cheng City. Knowing the young master's strength, she smiled and said, "You don't have to worry. Everything is within the young master's plan. There won't be any problems. You should continue to practice. When the young master comes back, try to perform better." Qiao Yin said it casually, but her nervousness could still be seen from Madame Shui and the other 2. After all, they knew too little. Although Dong Shui was extraordinary, he had offended the embroidered uniform guards. Last year, even Duke Ying suffered in front of them. Could Dong Shui, a new official, solve the problem? Of course, Yang Qindong could solve it, and there were many ways to do so. For example, if he showed his fangs, he could make Xianxia and more than 20 people disappear silently. No one would be able to trace it back to him afterwards. However, without evidence, it didn't mean that they couldn't suspect him. Whether it was the East Faction guards or the embroidered uniform guards, they didn't need any solid evidence. As long as they suspected you, they could take action. This was the damn privilege. Yang Qindong, who knew this, couldn't take this risk. Since he couldn't use his own strength, he could only borrow others' strength. After leaving the backyard, Yang Qindong began to remind Tiger's mane, who had become excited. Tell the brothers below not to move. Without the young master's permission, no one is allowed to move. Otherwise, they will be grounded for 3 days. By the way, I asked you to invite Lord Hu Zhangning to drink in advance. How did it go? Upon hearing that he would be grounded for 3 days, Tiger's mane, who had been full of fighting spirit, immediately became obedient. For these iron-blooded men, there were too few things in the world that could scare them. Because they weren't afraid, they became even more difficult to control. When he was at the docks, there were brothers who liked to cause trouble. However, no matter what kind of corporal punishment they received, they didn't seem to care at all. They just treated it as training. Later, the matter spread to Yang Chendong's ears, and he came up with the idea of confinement as a punishment. However, when people were locked up in a dark room for 3 days and had to eat and drink as usual, anyone who heard of this punishment was amused. Wasn't this just letting them rest? What kind of punishment was this? For a time, there were even people who deliberately caused trouble and wanted to experience this feeling. Naturally, the consequences were terrifying. No one spoke, no one paid attention to them, and they couldn't even see the slightest bit of sunlight for 3 days. Not many people could bear it. They roared, they cried bitterly, and they reflected on their mistakes. However, they could only be released after 3 days of confinement. When they finally came out and saw the sunlight and saw that there were people to talk to, they who had almost collapsed finally understood the severity of confinement. Although Tiger's Mane hadn't experienced it personally, he had heard of this matter long ago. At the docks and Crimson City, everyone's expression changed at the mention of confinement. Now that Yang Chendong came up with this punishment, he couldn't help but be disobedient. Young master, don't worry. Without orders, no one will dare to do anything. Also, Lord Hu is on duty today. He's waiting for young master in front of the potato field. Especially when he heard that the young master personally invited him, he seemed very happy. Yang Chendong didn't understand and shook his head after hearing this. At this time the night was dark and the wind was cool. If it wasn't for the good moon tonight, he really didn't know what was so happy about having someone on a date. However, even if Hu Chongning didn't object, of course, it was something that Yang Chendong wished for. He immediately nodded and said, "I'll go meet Lord Hu now. Remember to follow the plan." Yes. After Tiger's Mane agreed, his entire body flashed and disappeared into the darkness, as if he had never appeared. Walking alone, Yang Chendong arrived in front of a large potato field. From afar he could see a table filled with food and wine. On one side of the table was an empty seat, while on the other sat the guardian of the ironclad guard, Hu Zhongning. At this moment Hu Chongning was indeed in a good mood. This wasn't because he accepted the mission to protect the potatoes, but because of Yang Chendong's appointment. Hu Yen came to the Yang village and was very happy when she returned. He brought back many good things. All of this seemed to prove one thing, and that was that the relationship between his beloved daughter and Yang Chendong was not bad. As a father, the happiness of his children was naturally something that he greatly hoped for. Yang Chendong was young, but his performance was indeed old and steady, and his talent was outstanding. In addition, his family background was not bad. No matter how one looked at it, he was a good son-in-law. At least he had already received the approval of his future father-in-law. In the middle of the night, when Yang Chendong personally invited him, Hu Chongning thought that it must have something to do with his daughter. Could it be that he wanted to test his attitude? That must be it. Hu Chongning confirmed his thoughts. He also decided to properly meet with Yang Chendong. Even if he was satisfied, he still needed to give him an appropriate beating. He wanted to let the 6th young master know how fortunate it was to be able to marry his daughter, and that he needed to know how to cherish it. In his heart he was still thinking about how to beat Yang Chendong when they met. In the distance, the 6th young master, wearing a long green gown, walked over. Yu Guang had already noticed, but Hu Chongning didn't have any intention of speaking first. Tonight he was acting as the father-in-law. No matter what, he had to be reserved. Hu Chongning didn't speak, and Yang Chendong didn't have any intention of speaking either. He couldn't guess the other party's thoughts, and even more so, he didn't think that he had only met Hu Yen once, and it actually involved the discussion of marriage. In his consciousness and thoughts, no matter what, he had to wait for a period of time first, and wait until everyone was familiar with each other before making a decision. After all, marriage wasn't child's play. It had to be done carefully. Yang Chendong's consciousness of the future made it impossible for him to guess Hu Chongning's inner thoughts. Seeing that the other party didn't speak, the 6th young master was more than happy. What he wanted was to use the other party's identity and big shot to trick Xisheng. Before the main show started, he didn't know what to say. In this way, the two of them sat down like this. Then, without saying a word, they lowered their heads and drank like this. For a moment the atmosphere was a little oppressive. Yang Chendong didn't speak, But Hu Chongming wasn't unhappy in his heart. Instead he was still excited. This must be him thinking about how to phrase it. Hee, since it's like this I won't say anything. I'll just wait for you to take the initiative to bring it up and give you an invisible pressure. In the future, when his daughter really marries into the family, he will have more dignity as the father-in-law. Hu Chongming thought self-righteously and wanted to use this to put pressure on Yang Chendong to show the power and means of his future father-in-law. It was this strange combination of thoughts that made the two of them have no intention of leaving even though they didn't say a word. The atmosphere was delayed under such subtle emotions. When they had drunk no less than 5 glasses of wine, Hu Chongming was a little impatient. He couldn't help but mutter in his heart, this 6th young master's ability to keep his composure is pretty good. He can actually keep his composure. If this goes on, can we still talk about serious matters tonight? Is it going to be like this for the whole night? If so, it doesn't matter if the other party is young, but I'm in my 40s after all. Isn't this tormenting me? You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.